And we are back. Notre Dame fans, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. It's Tuesday, September 13th. We are about, 4 days away from Notre Dame hosting Cal and Notre Dame trying to get back into some sort of winning tradition. I think, Ryan, things are just kind of starting to pile up. The pressure starting to pile up. I know Marcus Freeman said yesterday there's no pressure on us. Yeah, there's a lot of pressure on them, and they need to get better and better and better. Today, we're going to talk about the offense. And with all due respect to Cal, we're going to preview Cal at some point later this week, but the reality is this isn't about Cal. If Notre Dame plays their game, not only do they beat Cal, but they're probably 3-0 right now, at worst 2-1. But they're not playing their game, and they're not playing in a way that is allowing them to be the team that I think they should be and can be. And so what we're going to talk about these next couple days, Ryan, is we're going to address a lot of the things that need to get fixed. And some of it's just personnel, some of it's philosophy, some of it's schematic, and they're all going to be things that we think you can fix now. There are going to be some things that need to get fixed. They're going to have to get fixed in the offseason. It's too late. This is just where you are.
Yep.
But I do think there are things that can get fixed now. We saw it last year. They made some offensive changes last year. They made some defensive changes early in the season that got the defense really right and rolling. We saw it on offense. And so we're going to bring up some of those things. And we told you we were critical of what happened on Saturday this weekend, but we said we're going to now talk about what to do next and what we think can happen next. And so we're going to offer some of those things that we need to see from Notre Dame's. And honestly, I think they're all things they should do. Otherwise, we wouldn't be talking about them. But there are things that I think could really help this football team. Some are minor and some are pretty major, but they're all things that are doable within season. And that's going to be the focus of today's game because yes, the defense needs to get better, but the defense has given you an opportunity within the issues they've had to be 2-0. Right. You're 0-2 because your offense hasn't done what it need to do. Now, I know long drives late in the game, those are big. Defense has to get better, but it should have never come to those long drives. And that's where your offense comes into play. And so that's what we're going to address today, right? And then, of course, with the mindset of who the quarterback is now, which is Drew Pyne, which means Drew Pyne goes from the guy a week ago that everybody said should play to now the guy that everyone's going to say needs to be benched because that's the life of the starting quarterback in Notre Dame.
It is so funny. The most popular person on a football team is the backup quarterback always. They always want to see him playing. We'll see. I mean, again, hoping for the best. We said it, Brian. We didn't know that it would be to this extent, but we said in the preseason that Drew Pyne was going to be an important player in this season, right? And he's going to have his opportunity to right the ship, weather the storm, whatever cliche you want to use as far as what he's going to be doing with Notre Dame, but he's in a big spotlight, obviously. But I like this podcast that we're doing today specifically because I think it's important to have a growth mindset. I do. We had a couple days where we just dwelled and we complained
and vented.
Everyone needs that, man. Everyone needs that. But now it's about moving forward, right? And for Notre Dame to be the best version of themselves from this point for the rest of the 2022 season and to have some momentum here moving forward, these are the changes that we need to see happen. This is what needs to happen for Notre Dame to get back on track because although everybody wants to fire Marcus Freeman already, I still believe in Marcus Freeman. Yeah. I do. And I still think that,
And it's just we're not going to get into the whole emotional stuff and fire this person, that person. Nobody's getting fired right now. Okay, nobody's getting fired right now. And you rarely fire a coach in season, assistant coach, head coach, unless there's some sort of egregious thing going on, and that's not happening right now.
Right.
So we're going to stick with reality. We're going to put our big boy pants on and deal with things that are reality. And the reality is just fixing things, and that's going to be the key. And that's Marcus Freeman's job. Get it right. Doesn't matter how you got here. It matters what you do next. And that's the mindset that the Notre Dame players need to have. They need to kind of be a little bit ticked off. They need to be a little bit, ticked off, but ticked off from the standpoint of now what are you going to do about it type of thing. And that's what we're going to discuss today. And Ryan, we're going to kind of look at it in 4 different directions. Number 1, we're going to talk about personnel changes. Number 2, we're going to talk about scheme changes, run game wise, scheme philosophy changes, run game wise. Number 3, we're going to talk about scheme and sort of philosophy changes in the pass game. And then 4, we're going to go to sort of a big picture overall offensive changes needed to make. So things that are not necessarily run game related, pass game related, but just bigger picture changes that needed to be made and made quickly because the reality is, Ryan, when Drew Pyne is your quarterback, you are a different offense. And I know Coach Freeman said offense doesn't change a whole lot. Yeah, it does. because your run game, the only run game you had that was working the first 2 games was your quarterback, and that's not Drew Pyne. And so, yes, he can scramble a little bit and all that, but you're not running read zone with him. You're not running power read with him. You're not – and you can run it, but teams aren't respecting it. You're not going to impact teams. So maybe you do it on a 3rd and 2 if they overload it and you got the read zone called and he can just pull it and move the chains. Sure, but that's really the extent of it.
He's a take you off guard type of designed runner. He's not a huge part of the elements of your running attack being the quarterback run game. So yeah, I mean, he can do some stuff out of structure.
When the offense was just bogged down, they said, okay, let's just let Tyler run it. And they went right down the field and scored a touchdown. You don't have that in your repertoire now with Tyler Buckner out. That's not Drew Pyne's game. That's not Steve Angeli's game. That's not Ron Paul's third game. The only way you're doing that is if you go to a Wildcat. That's the only way you're doing that, and without one of these guys. So we're going to talk reality and who this team is and what needs to be changed, because the standard doesn't change. The expectations don't change. You're going to go out and win week after week after week, and you've got to get that thing rolling right away. Because for me, Ryan, for all the frustration that we've had the first 2 weeks, the reality is Notre Dame led Ohio State for a much longer period of time than Ohio State led Notre Dame. Notre Dame had multiple opportunities in the 4th quarter against Marshall to win that game, and win that game convincingly if they could put a couple drives together. And so, but you didn't get it done. The reason that's important to say is because it's not like you're just out here getting destroyed every week and you're just like, wow. It's all fixable. Almost all of it is fixable. And that's what we're going to focus on, is the fixable stuff that can get you to where you need to get to. So, Ryan, let's begin first and foremost with personnel changes, because I do think there need to be personnel changes. And in some instances, it's because guys aren't getting the job done. But in other instances, just because playing these guys more is going to make your team better. And that's what we're going to discuss first. And I think the first one is one that I wrote an article about yesterday, and that is putting Chris Tyree in at running back. That, to me, now he is the number one running back. Let me be more specific. He started last Saturday, and because they started in 21 personnel. He has played a lot of snaps. What we're more talking about is making him the focal point of your offense, of your run game from a touches standpoint. And that has not been the case. He's had 9 carries in 2 games, and 2 of them are handing the ball off the end of the half to run the clock out. And so that is where we're going to be at. Chris Tyree right now needs to become, and we'll talk about why, but he needs to become a focal point of your offense starting yesterday. No, actually, today will be the first day of Cal prep. So starting today, it needs to start today.
Brian, he's still the most frustrating, confusing usage guy. Like I just can't wrap my mind around it, right? Because when you're not blocking well, right? So when you're not blocking well and there's some inconsistencies just from your offensive line in general, wouldn't you want the guy that you have a larger margin for error for, right? Like, because if he's able to just break a little crease, then he's going to create a big play, right? And I think that you would want to feature that guy when maybe you're not blocking the best that you possibly can, because there's ways that you can manipulate space and get him in space. And they've done that a little bit. I mean, like in the first game, they ran some jet stuff to him, but that was basically all they ran with him. Right. There's ways that you can get him one-on-one in the passing game. I mean, they've tried to do it. I think they ran like a little option route last game where they caught the ball over the middle.
And it was just a little now screen is what they did. That's all it was. And he caught the ball behind the line, made a dude miss, and picks up 9 yards.
All I know is when you're not getting a substantial amount of push up front and not maintaining blocks, I want a guy like him that can make you look good even when things aren't maybe going as well up front as you want, right? Because the thing about Audric Estime, I love Audric Estime. I think he's going to be a fantastic runner for Notre Dame. But he does need blocking up front to be an effective runner. He needs to get downhill. He needs to get his momentum there. Chris Tyree can make you look good when things aren't perfect sometimes. Sure. Like that's what he can do, right? So he is absolutely a focal point. I need him to be involved in the run game, in the pass game, in the kick return game. I know we're talking about an offensive specific, but he needs his touches. It is a paramount thing because you need to supplement touches in the run. I mean, because Tyler Buckner's out now. So you need to supplement those touches in the run game somewhere, right? So let's make it easy. Let's supplement it to Chris Tyree, the most dynamic player on our offense. I think it's easy.
Right. And I think that helps the other guys too. I think that helps Audric Estime. I think that helps him because now there's not that pressure of, hey, you're our guy. I want to see them do what they've done this past week, which is more 21 personnel. but let Chris kind of be that lead back at times and do things where you're using him. Let him run some of the inside zone stuff. Let him run the counters. Let him run the outside zone track that Notre Dame wants to get going. And you can also do those things with Audric Estime, because as we said, you need to play around to your players' strengths, but they're taking that way too far right now in that they're only doing certain things with Chris Tyree and they're only doing certain things with Audric Estime, which makes it really easy for defenses to kind of know when this guy's in the game, here's what they're doing. And then based on how Notre Dame is lining up with their alignments, which we'll get into a little bit, you kind of know where they're going with the ball, and that's problematic, right? So on top of some of the other run game fixes, I think Chris Tyree being more of a focal point. Now, does that mean that Chris Tyree needs to touch the ball 20 times a game? No, that's not what we're saying. But he needs to touch it. He needs to carry it more than 9 times over a 2-game span, with 2 of them not really being real carries. I mean, you're just here, run, and, I'm sure they'd like him to rip off a 60-yard run there, but you're not running that play thinking, gee, I think on this inside zone play, we might crease it for 60 yards. Right. Now that he's there. So I think that's one change that needs to make. I think that help, like I said, that'll help Audric Estime. I think it'll help the line get some confidence going. And obviously Chris needs to execute in those situations too. But I think the opportunities have to be there. You have to get him more involved. And then that also makes him more, here's the thing, right? Get him more involved in the normal runs. And now all of a sudden teams can't be as anticipating, okay, let's guard against the jet, the screens, the wheels, because that's all they're using him for. So when that's all you're using him for, it's a lot easier to game plan how to stop him. When on one snap, he could just hit you with an inside zone. On the next snap, you may, boom him out, boom is a motion, boom him out and throw him a screen, or even if you don't boom him out, just let him run a screen from the backfield, right? Because he is faster than the linebackers. You can use him now more on screens if he's a greater part of the run of the offense, because now you're not keying that. Right. And so that's then Ryan, I just made a note. That's something that we have to add to the pass game thing that we had talked about before. We forgot to add to our pre-game or pre-show notes. But those are things I think you can all do. And then that takes some of the pressure off Audric Estime. And now Audric can kind of slowly start to build into the role that you want him to have. And hopefully by then the offensive line is getting going a little bit more too.
I like that you mentioned 21 personnel, because we already talked about it, right? You're not going to run quarterback power read. You're not going to run just zone read a ton. But what you can, Brian, is that if you're running out of with the 2 backs in the game, you can supplement those touches, right? Because you can still run the jet with Chris Tyree and then give the power look to Audric Estime off of that read, right? You can still do things where, hey, inside zone to Audric Estime, now you have Chris Tyree coming around on a little swing, so he's basically the outside run. Like you can supplement.
It's your version of triple option is what it is, Ryan.
100%. And it's not going to look the same as it did with Tyler Buckner, but it's still the same conceptual things, right? Like the threat for the inside and out are still there, which is vital, I think, for this offense, especially because we're going to talk more about Drew Pyne later, but Drew Pyne without the running threat that Tyler Buckner is, things are going to get a little more condensed, right? So using the speed of Chris Tyree to open things up horizontally a little bit and get guys out of the box and continue to have numbers games, I think that's vital. So I love the idea of 21 personnel. I think that if not featured, because you can't run it exclusively, but it should be a heavy mix in the run game, in my opinion.
Well, one thing I like is if you here's something I like, because again, I'm not running power read with Drew Pyne. I'm not. But here's what I can do. I can have Tyree in the slot to the left or Braden Lindsey, and then I can have Audric Estime to my left, and then I can motion that guy and I can run my power read option, and then you can go back to you go back to old school spread stuff. And you're not running the quarterback, but you're read, shovel. Remember how Utah used to do that back in the day? When Dan Mullen was the OC? I mean, that's still a concept. You're running power, but now you're doing it with a shovel pass, and where you're still getting that action. And so to me, that's where some of the creativity needs to get from, where you say, hey, how can we supplement this and still get our guys touches to where now Tyree and Estime or Lindsey and Estime are still options. Or here's a thought, go 11 personnel and have it be Chris Tyree as the shovel option. There's all types of different things you can do, and it's one play. It's one play that you're running a lot of different ways, and you're going to hear that theme here in a little bit. I think another thing needs to happen at running back too, and I'm not going to take the stance that a lot of people are taking on Logan Diggs. I think Logan Diggs needs to play less right now, but not for the reasons that I think a lot of people are saying.
Mm-hmm.
Ryan, you and Sean Davis got together yesterday after the show.
Yep.
And we talked about we're watching him play. We went through, pulled some clips up, and it is very obvious that Logan has zero faith right now in his left shoulder. If you go look at the stiff arm he had, like he just didn't want to put his arm out. Guess what play he got injured on in the spring? Stiff arming a guy with his left hand. The pass pro where he got beat, he is there, and instead of stepping into the guy with his left shoulder, he turns and tries to throw his right shoulder into the guy. That is a kid that mentally does not have confidence in his shoulder. Right. And you're going to hurt that kid by putting him out there. You're either going to hurt him mentally or you're going to hurt him physically because he's still protecting his shoulder. A running back that is protecting his shoulder is going to hurt himself more. And so to me, it's about get him out, right? And not in a negative way. It's like, look, this is on us. This is the conversation I'm having. If it's me, it's going to be Coach Freeman, Coach Reese, and Coach McCullough all calling Logan in and saying, hey, look, man, this is on us. You did everything right. You worked hard. You rehabbed like crazy. You got that. But look, you're clearly not confident there. We're going to pull you back a couple weeks, let you get healthy and get right, and then we're going to get you back in there because Logan Diggs is too good of a player from what we have seen to look like how he's looked the first two games. And he's running like a back that doesn't have confidence in his shoulder. And that's a scary thing because if they keep doing it, he'll either get the confidence back and play better, or it'll get to the point where he never gets it back. Yep. And that's a scary thing, and we've seen that. So they need to pull back with him. And I know why they forced him, because there's other depth issues, but also because he's a good player. But he's not playing. He's a liability right now. And I don't mean that to be critical of Logan. I don't think you should have put him in the situation that you did. Now, what's a concern you and I had, Ryan, with him coming in was, how's that going to be with that shoulder? Because a back and a shoulder is a dangerous thing. We were talking about how you hope to have him back by October, and then all of a sudden he's back for the opener. I think they rushed him too quickly. And that's more of a medical thing, I think, than anything. But I think the coaches also need to see this and say, look, this is not the actions of a kid who doesn't want contact. We know that Logan Diggs has no issues with contact. This is a kid that has no faith in his left shoulder that got hurt. And that's why he's doing, I mean, it's obvious. He doesn't want to stiff arm with his left arm. He doesn't want to lead into a block with his left shoulder. That's a mental thing, Ryan. And you've got to get him out of there and let him get right mentally and physically before you put him back in there.
I mean, because the thing of it is, Brian, is that anybody that doesn't have confidence is not going to play very well, but especially such a young guy, man. Like, I think we forget sometimes that he's a sophomore, right? Like, he's 19, maybe 20 years old, like maybe, right? So when you don't have confidence, man, like, you're just not going to play well. You're just not. And you can see it right now, unfortunately. And to your point, he's a really talented player. He really is. He's a gifted football player. But the physicality he runs with is a big part of his game, man. And the ability to pass block and do all those types of things, like, you need that at the running back position. You need it. And right now, he just is not able to fulfill his duties. Like, I did the same thing in high school. Like, my senior year, I tore the labrum in my left shoulder, so I had to have, like, one of those harnesses on, right? And I played linebacker. It's like the same deal. Like, bad shoulders at linebacker is a no-go, man. And I lost confidence, and I started tackling everything with my right shoulder. I did not tackle a single play with my left shoulder the course of the second half of the season. Just didn't do it because you lack confidence.
I bet you $20 you probably missed some tackles you otherwise might have made because of that. I would have.
I was also a left tackle, so I didn't have a left arm. So when some guys went outside track, I would just stick it out there and then just try to ride it outside. It just would not work, man. It just would not work. So I became a liability to my team. And it's unfortunate this happens, but the key thing is that, to your point, Logan Diggs is a really young football player right now, right? He's really young. And you do not want to hurt this kid mentally and to cost him the entirety of his future, because it can happen. I've seen it happen, man. There's guys that get injured and they're healthy fully, but they just seem a step slower. They seem a step hesitant because they never gain that confidence back. You can't let that happen with this kid. You can't.
I think another change that needs to happen, there's going to be two changes that we believe need to happen at wide receiver. And the first one is Tobias Merriweather needs to play. No more of this. Look, and this is all we've heard. we've heard about, oh, well, he does. You got to earn trust. You got to do this. I'm so tired of hearing that over the years. I'm so sick of hearing that. I thought when Brian Kelly was gone, we would be done with that. I mean, there were times on Saturday on defense, both of the corners were true freshmen, right? You got to give them a chance to play. Tobias Merriweather's too talented, and everything we've heard from all of our sources, everything the coaches said publicly is he works hard, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this whole he doesn't know the whole offense, I don't care. I do not care. Number one, it's your job as a coach to get him going. It starts with Tommy Rees and it goes to Chancey Stuckey. Get him going, number one. Number two, figure out what he does know right now and help him become really good at that, and then get him the flipping ball. Because what's happening right now is you have a bunch of smaller guys. Lorenzo Styles is your long receiver. Jaden Thomas is a different animal. We'll get to him here in a minute. But as far as the guys that can stretch vertically, well, when you have smaller receivers and you're running a bunch of vertical stuff and vertical meaning 4 verts, and then off of horizontal stretches, your margin for error on those smaller players is a lot smaller.
Yep.
When you got a big 6'4" kid with super long arms, guess what? He's covered. Don't care. Throw it up. Let him go make a play on it. Right?
Back shoulder, throw it up in the air. Yep.
They should have done the first 2 games. Flat out, no excuses. Don't want to hear any BS. Don't care if it was Ohio State. Don't care about anything. No excuse. Coaching fail. Right? Simple as that. But here's the great thing about coaching fails. I've made them, Ryan. I've made coaching mistakes, personnel-wise, all types of things. You've made them when you were a coach. You got a chance to correct them. As long as you still have games left, you have a chance to correct them. So this isn't a bash Tommy, bash Chancey. Hey, this is what you did. It was the wrong move. Fix it. Get Tobias going. I can't tell you, time and time again, how many times I've heard from a defensive player or a defensive, someone associated with a defensive player, whatever else the case may be, of being in a situation that says, hey, look, man, the toughest kid that we have to guard and practice is Tobias Merriweather. So there's literally I haven't heard a single, like you'd hear from some people things about Jordan Johnson and make say, yeah, okay, I understand why they don't trust him. I think he should have played more, but I understand why they didn't trust him. I haven't heard any of that about Tobias Merriweather. And he was a better player coming out than Jordan Johnson was. So flat out, he needs to play. And I'm not talking about just giving him 5-10 snaps a game. He needs to play. Honestly, for me, right now, if I'm at Notre Dame or if I'm Marcus Freeman or if I'm Tommy Rees and I'm going to step up and say, hey, what needs to happen? Here's what needs to happen. Your starting receiving core is Lorenzo Styles and Tobias Merriweather on the outside and Braden Lindsey in the slot. And then I'm going to move Braden and Lorenzo around a little bit and say, this is what we're doing. We're going with speed and size. And then Jaden Thomas, you're going to mix in at different spots. That's fine. When Joe Wilkins gets back, he can mix in at different spots when he's more healthy. Deion Colsey gets healthy, he can. But that's my starting lineup. That's what I'm rolling with. Yep. Those 3 at receiver and Chris Tyree at running back is my starting lineup, and then mixing in those other players. That's flat out what they need to do starting now. I'm not talking about playing them a little bit more, Ryan. I'm saying screw it. Row and 2, right?
Yeah.
The veterans that know everything have yet to get to 20 points in a game. You're 0-2. You just lost to Marshall.
Mm-hmm.
Play him.
This is another bizarre one for me because we spent most of the summer leading into the fall, Brian, talking about which big receiver is going to kind of be a breakout. And obviously that's talking about Tobias Merriweather and it's talking about Deion Colsey. And with Deion Colsey out, I mean, you need to supplement the size somewhere, man. Like you need it, right? Like it just seems like such a no-brainer that he should be playing football. And again, like I understand partly to it. I know me and Sean were talking about it a little bit yesterday. If there's not trust there, I get it to a degree, but to your point, you can simplify a wide receiver's responsibilities pretty easily, right? Like you can give him a little bit of a niche role and maybe a abbreviated offense that he can run, or at least abbreviated section of the playbook where he can become a player in your offense. And right now with the inconsistencies you're having at wide receiver, with the depth issues you're having at wide receiver, there's no reason for him not to play.
It's not
There's
like
no
other
reason.
dudes are playing well and you can
Right.
justify, hey, look, here's why he's not playing. Like in 2018, they should have played Braden Lindsey and Kevin Austin a little bit more. But the excuse was, yeah, but who am I taking off? Miles Boykin, who's having a great year. Chase Claypool's having a really good year. Chris Fink, who's really good. You could somewhat understand it then. My whole thing is, yeah, I mean, those guys need breathers too. They wore down a little bit in November. But it's like you could at least understand it. After what we saw the first two games, I'm sorry. There is no justification for it. There is no excuse for it. Unless the kid's not working hard, which nobody I've ever talked to has said about him, or unless the kid literally just doesn't know a single play, then, look, then okay, here's what you do then. Give him a freaking wristband and write on there, this is what you do on every play. Right? I've done that before.
Or have Lorenzo Styles whispered into his ear, like whatever it takes, man. Like there's options to figure that stuff out. There's options to figure that out.
Yes.
But needs to happen. Needs to happen.
That has to happen, and it has to happen right now. Okay? Because in 2 years, you've got a chance to have this receiving core look a whole lot different. And part of the reason that you're not hearing enough about these guys haven't played a lot of snaps is because you didn't play them in the past. That's why. And so, just like last year, Lorenzo Styles should have been a part of that rotation day one, especially once Lawrence Keys bailed. Then he flat out should have been a guy from day one, but they waited until Joe Wilkins got hurt against Cincinnati before they got to that part. So here's another receiver change that I think needs to happen right now. That is Xavier Watts needs to have a sit down with the coaches. They need to have a sit down with Xavier Watts, other way around, and say, hey, look, man, we love what you're doing on defense. But two things. Number one, we can't justify having you playing both ways because we're taking away from you being as good as you can be at both spots. At safety, Brandon's playing well. DJ and Houston are doing some good things. You've got Ramon's getting better and better and better. We need you on offense. And then you move him to offense and you play him now.
Yes.
Now. You get him the ball now, because here's one thing that I can guarantee you. I don't know if Xavier Watts is going to be an impact player. I don't know if he's ever going to be the receiver I think he can be. But you know what I know he's going to bring to you? Something you're greatly lacking right now? A warrior. A kid that is going to fight, scrap, claw, play with attitude, call people out, fight, and I'm going to say it again, fight, scrap, and claw. And there is a severe lacking of compete level at receiver right now. Here's the thing that's making me really sad right now. You know who the only receiver I've seen that's fought for the football at all this year? It's Braden Lindsey and Matt Salerno. That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. That interception on Saturday, again, the second one, the pick six, Tyler shouldn't have thrown that ball there. No doubt. Mayer was open on the other side of the field. But that was not a ball that in any universe should have ever been intercepted by a guy that wants to be out there. Right. And so
better less a pick six at that.
Right.
Like it was,
So, so Jaden Thomas, we hear great things about what he's doing in practice. The concern you and I always had was until the spring game, we'd never really seen him do it. And you know my feeling about spring game. We didn't see him do it again in practice this year. And then he's banged up and he's not in there. He's got to, like we talked about how he can play all those different positions. I think we put too much on him expectation-wise early on. I think the coaches did too. They need to find a spot for Jaden, and to me, it needs to be in the slot right now. Start in the slot, let him work there, and then as he gets more comfortable and gets more experience, then you can expand his role. That's on me, right? I'll own that. That's something I said you can use him all over, but as the kid never played a snap of played very, very few snaps of Division I football. He played like 5 or 6 last year. So put too much on him too early. Get him the slot, let him learn, let him get comfortable there, then build out. Because that's going to be an overall theme we're going to talk about in a lot of things. Simplify. Like linebacker, you're asking these linebackers to play all over. You know what? That's on us, right? Let's limit some of that right now until the kids prove that they can do the one thing. Then once they prove they can do the one thing, then you can ask them to do a second thing. And then once they learn to do the second thing, you can then help them do the third thing. There's only one guy that I've seen so far. Well, I mean, Braden Lindsey and Lorenzo Styles have proven to me they can do a little bit of multiple things. But with Tobias, he's my W right now. With Jaden, he's playing slot for me right now, right? And that's where I'm going to have him working. And that's what I'm doing. So I'm not saying yank Jaden Thomas out. He has not played well the first 2 games. What I am saying, though, is, however, you're asking him to do too much, and he's playing slow. Not that he is slow. He's not a burner. We've never thought that, but he's playing slow. And as I explained on Sunday, you can tell the difference between a guy who is slow and a guy who is running slow. And there is a difference. Jaden is running slow because he's unsure of what he's doing. I think those are to me 4 changes that happen receiver. So Tobias at W, Ryan, I'm going to wrap it up with this and then you comment on it. Tobias at W. This is what I'm starting with on Saturday against Cal. 11 personnel. Chris Tyree is my number 1 back. Michael Mayer is my tight end. Tobias is my W. Braden Lindsey is my Z. Lorenzo Styles is my X. That's my starting lineup. And Jaden Thomas is going to work some in the slot. If Joe Wilkins is healthy, he can work some outside. Braden can play inside and out. Lorenzo can play inside and out. And then there we're going. That's what I'm rolling with. And that gives Drew Pyne a big guy to throw to, which he's going to need, and then a lot of speed to throw to, which is going to fit with some of the other things we're going to talk about later. That's what I'm doing, Ryan. What say you?
Yeah. No, I agree completely with I need Lorenzo Styles and Braden Lindsey to the fields. I need them out there because I think they can be a little bit interchangeable, Brian, right? Like I think that there's spots where I can move Braden Lindsey outside and let him take the top off the defense and also let Lorenzo Styles do some of that quick separating stuff inside and breaking routes, RPO action, whatever it is. Like I think that they can supplement each other very well. They can complement each other really well. The biggest issue, and again, I just go back to it again, man, is that they just don't have playmaking size right now at that W position. They just don't have it, right? Because, I still think Lorenzo Styles, I thought, had some really nice moments against Marshall. I think he's going to be a fantastic receiver for Notre Dame, but I don't want him to have to be thrown into the W unnecessarily. And right now, Jaden Thomas. Did
you say Lorenzo Styles? Is that who you said?
I don't want to see Lorenzo Styles at the W. Yeah. I don't want to see Jaden Thomas at the W just because he's, again, like you can tell that he is not playing confidently right now. I want to see someone that has playmaking size, playmaking ability in a bigger frame out in W. So, I mean, we've been talking about it for weeks. I want to see Tobias Merriweather play. Like I do. If Deion Cole, especially if Deion Colsey's out too, right? If Deion Colsey's injured and not available, then we need to find it somewhere.
I don't know if you saw him in pregame, Ryan, but he doesn't look sharp. Like he doesn't look like he has any burst off. He's got this giant knee brace on his knee. I just don't think he can go right now.
I don't think so either.
And that's been a big. I mean, he hasn't been able to stay healthy for a chunk of his Notre Dame career.
Well, and I was going to say too is he would probably be in a similar spot that Jaden Thomas is in, right? Even if he was asked to play, it's like he's not confident. Is he going to be confident on it right now? Because that's the biggest thing with Deion Colsey is Deion Colsey. He's a height, weight, speed guy, right? Like he's a guy that can push it vertically. If he's not able to do those things, then he also is a player that is probably going to be lacking in confidence as well. So my whole point of it is that I think that Lorenzo Styles will be much better suited to play a position other than W. I do not want to see him forced there because they don't have another answer. I think you might have an answer on the roster. You just, for whatever reason, have not played him yet. So
there's no excuse not to. No excuse not to. And another person who plays some W is Michael Mayer. And so we'll get into that as well. So those are some personnel changes. Offensive line wise, Ryan, I don't know if I'm at the point yet where I'm ready to make changes on the offensive line. Or let me rephrase this. I don't know what the changes need to be on the offensive line because I think that's a little bit of a different animal, and any kind of little change can have a big impact, positively or negatively. I'm going to trust Harry Hiestand a little bit to make those changes. But what I do know that I would do if I was in Coach Hiestand's shoes, I am sitting down and I'm letting every guy know there is not a guy on my roster right now that has locked in a spot the way we've played the first 2 weeks. I'm not trying to put pressure on y'all, but you're not living up to the standard. So I'm going to work to get y'all where you need to be. You guys need to take it and do better. Take what we're practicing and apply it to the field. If you're someone not in the starting lineup and you're not happy about it, give me a reason to play you in practice this week. Because I love Josh Lugg. He's a great, great kid. But a 6th-year senior his size should be playing better. I'm sorry. He should. I love Zeke Correll in the spring was excellent. Zeke Correll in the blue gold game was excellent. Zeke Correll as a starter in 2020 in 2 mop-up moments had some really good moments, especially against North Carolina. Zeke Correll the first 2 games just not been good enough. Now, am I ready to just dismiss all the work and say, oh, no? Or, because here's the thing too is it's easy for us to sit here as analysts and for fans to sit there at home and say, screw him, throw that guy. But here's the thing. Once you bench a guy, you might lose him, right?
Yep.
Or you bench a guy too soon before the light's about to go on. And so you got to be really smart about, okay, this kid is doing this in practice and it's really good.
Mm-hmm.
I got to figure out how to get him over here to do it on Saturday. Right. And I think that's the issue that Notre Dame is having with Zeke Correll, is because everything I've heard going all the way back to last spring into this spring into the fall is this kid is really good at center. I'm hearing it from defensive players. I'm hearing it from offensive people. But then he gets to Saturdays and the feet stop and you wonder if the speed is too much for him. I don't know what it is. But there comes a point in time when and we talked about this with quarterback over the years, where there comes a point in time where you got to say, hey, look, yes, Ian Book is a great practice player, but this other kid over here, number 15, is more of a game day player. We got to make the move. Well, it's the same thing here at the offensive line. I don't know what the move is. I don't know when the move is, but the reality is they have reached their point of, okay, this isn't acceptable anymore. Either play better or I'm going to find somebody else who, like, I'll put a young guy in there to make the mistakes that Josh Lugg is making and that Zeke Correll is making. I will rather put, like, I can live with Blake Fisher not playing well the first two games because I can say, start number 4. He's a sophomore. Right. Now, he needs to get better, right? But when a 6-year senior is making those mistakes or a 5th-year captain is jumping off sides on a drive that could potentially put the game away on a 3rd and 3, he's false starting, it's not okay for me. When a senior like Zeke, I know Zeke hasn't played a lot of snaps, but he's still a flipping senior. So my point is, am I ready to give up on Zeke Correll? No, I'm not. I think he's a good player. I think he's not playing well. There's a difference.
Yeah.
That's my issue with Josh Lugg. I think he's a good player. He's shown it, but he's not playing well. But at some point in time, you have to say, okay, I think you can be a good player, but you're not playing well. I have to give somebody else a shot. I don't know if that's right now, Ryan. I'm not saying it is. I think you need to be real hesitant about moving Jarrett Patterson back to center because there is no coming back from that, right? Like once that happens, it happens. And then 2 weeks later, the light goes on for Zeke Correll. You don't throw him in there and then move the other guy back out to guard again, right? Like I think you need to rethink things now that Drew Pyne's taken over because you are going to have a different quarterback. But if you're going to decide to go with Zeke Correll, then you need to roll with Zeke Correll. And if he doesn't play well, then you need to find somebody else for center and leave Jarrett Patterson alone. Or you make the move now and you roll with it. And so I don't know what the moves are, Ryan and people in the chat, but I just know that what we're seeing right now isn't good enough. It's not good enough from a coaching standpoint because this is what I've said. I know for a fact that Harry Hiestand does not teach things the way that we saw them on practices. You've seen it with your own eyes, Ryan. But at some point in time, you're either teaching it or you're allowing it, and both of them result in the same thing. And so there has to be accountability from a coaching standpoint. There has to be accountability from a player standpoint, and we're getting to that time where these things need to get fixed and get corrected, Ryan.
This is something that me, you, and Sean all agreed upon. Yesterday, if you joined us for the show, everyone out there listening, you heard us speak adamantly about every day is an evaluation opportunity for the offensive line moving forward. It is. Everyone should be being evaluated on a day-to-day basis now. Every single player. Because we know it hasn't been good enough through 2 games. It hasn't. And it is such an important and vital position, not only just from a structure of winning football games, but also just working together. One bad offensive lineman can fracture potentially 4 other good ones around him. Like that's how important cohesion is up front, right?
Ryan, and you said this to me after the game on Saturday. You said I think that you and then Vince also said this to me. It's in every single play, it's one guy.
Yep.
It's like one guy, but it's a different one guy every time.
Yes.
And I'm bringing that up. I'm interrupting you to bring that up because that right there makes your point that if it's just one guy on every single play, your line's going to stink.
Yep.
And that's the reality of it.
And this isn't just the Zeke Correll is the whipping boy or Josh Lugg is the whipping boy. Everyone needs to play better. Every single player.
Fisher,
I'm not saying
Jarrett Patterson, all of them.
I'm not sitting here and saying that just the center and right guard position are the only 2 spots that need to be evaluated. No, I'm saying all 5 need to be evaluated on a daily basis. They do, right? Because Harry Hiestand has done this before, Brian, right? He has shown that he's not afraid to make a change during the season if it proves who is the best 5 on the field or to jumpstart stuff, right? Like, he has shown that he's okay with doing that. Notre Dame, again, I'm not sure you're there yet, because in order to replace someone, there needs to be someone that earned that spot, right? Like, you're not just going to replace him just to replace him. There has to be somebody that is playing well enough where you say, like, yeah, I can make that change now. So every day is an evaluation period for everyone, but I think especially for the offensive line, it is vital for Notre Dame to figure out who the best 5 is moving forward. That is paramount, because it could be a long-term decision too. Yeah. Like, it doesn't just have to be this game decision. It just has to be this season decision. Like, I mean, honestly, Brian, like, we've talked about, freshmen, you usually don't want to, like, push along too far as like, playing early from an offensive line perspective, right? But if Billy Stroud's ready to play, to play, right? If he's one of your best 5, get him on the field, and then that's a long-term decision and a short-term decision.
And that's just an example. That's just an example, not necessarily because we haven't seen Billy Stroud practice.
Sure.
We have no clue.
If Ty Chan's ready, whoever,
we're just making a
doesn't
point.
matter.
You pick a guy, Andrew Kristoff, it could be Pat Coogan,
Michael Carmody. Sure.
Right. It just, you got to find guys that want to be out there. The biggest thing is, the thing that bothers me the most is just we haven't seen the toughness. Like, it's not that they're not playing hard, they're not playing physical. And I don't know if that's a mental thing or if it's, I don't know what it is, but they've got to figure out a way to get it fixed. And that's not just a player problem. That's a coaching problem as well. And it starts at the top and it works down to the position coaches, right? It's about Coach Reese putting in stuff that the guys know. It's about the offensive line coach making sure the guys are executing and being held to a certain standard. That's where it needs to get to. So when you look at these things, right, we spend a lot of time on personnel changes, And that's because I think those things are things that can jumpstart you. Because number one, they're good players. You're not putting your best player, let me rephrase that. You're not putting your most talented players on the field enough. And in some instances, at all.
Yeah.
And the excuses for it are just not, except there are some excuses that are legitimate. The kid doesn't work hard. The kid doesn't put in the work. The kid's not going to class. The kid can't catch the football. The kid can't block. Okay, really athletic, but if he's doing those things and you can't play him. I've heard none of those things about Tobias Merriweather. I've heard none of those things about Chris Tyree. I've heard none of those things about the other offensive line we're talking about. So we need to see them figure some stuff out. And we'll see. There's some other things that we want to get into. We're going to go run game, pass game next, and then we're going to kind of talk about what the offense needs to look like with Drew Pyne at quarterback. Yep. And we'll focus on the things that we think Drew can do well and things that he needs to do. And so building around that type of offense. Number one, I think there's some things run game wise, Ryan, that need to get adjusted. So as we look at the Notre Dame run game, I think the first thing for me, Ryan, is everything is slow. And again, we're not talking about, guys are slow. It's just the way that they're running it, even like duo, inside zone, like stuff that is not super, super fast, but needs to be faster. Everything is just slow. The timing of the run game is off as well. They've got to figure out a way to have some stuff that speeds up because you have to be able to attack the line of scrimmage with different tempos. Some stuff is counter. It's more misdirection. It takes more time to kind of get going. You want to misdirect. You want to get their eyes going here. So then you can kind of set up the leverage over here on the counter blocks, the kick out and the wrap. And then you got to time it up correctly to hit the line of scrimmage. Their outside zone is a slow swipe play. Your stretch. Find your point of insertion and go. Other stuff needs to be bam. We're hitting them right now. Right? Whether that's a quick G wrap, whether that's a trap play, whether that's just a freaking wedge. I don't care. But you got to figure out some stuff that's hitting a little faster. Right? And so changing the speed in which you attack the line of scrimmage, I think that right there is the first thing that we can see change with the Notre Dame run game. Is that right there?
Yeah, everything just seems like it's taking forever. I mean, it does, man. Like it just, and I know Notre Dame's running backs are not that slow. Like I know they're not, right? And it's frustrating. It is frustrating because it's like, Brian, like an inside zone, right? Like you're talking about an inside zone, you're working front side and then maybe it hits backside A, B. I feel like everything is hitting front side, but hitting front side slow and not going anywhere. That's what I feel like right now.
Every team I've ever seen run the inside zone out of shotgun, it's never meant to go play side.
Ever.
Like I remember, like Chip Long had this philosophy, and I got a laugh out of it when he said it to me the first time, and then I realized he was serious, and I was like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, okay. He said, he said, I told the backs, if you go play side with your insertion and you don't get at least 4 yards, I'm yanking you out of the game.
Love it.
Because it's not meant to go play side. It's meant to cut
No.
backside, but they're not doing that right now. And then duo is meant to be a call side run. So if you're running duo to the right, it's meant to go to the right. If you're running inside zone to the right, it's actually meant to cut back to the left.
Right.
And inside zone needs to be I say slow swipe, and the inside zone is a fast swipe, right? It's you got to go. You're coming off hard, getting that double team, push to the next level, get movement. Back's got to hit it, see it, cut, and then you're ready to rock and roll. And so we're not seeing enough of that from this offensive line, and then from the design of the play, because the backs are slow getting downhill. That needs to get corrected now. And the only way you can be that slow with your insertion is if you're Wake Forest, and it's because you're running that super slow read where you're pulling and throwing an RPO off of it. And that's not what Notre Dame is doing. And I don't love that offense either, right? I don't, because it's why they get stopped by every good defense they play. I'm simply making the point that's the only time schematically that makes sense, right? Is to do that.
And I think, Brian, you're also costing yourself yardage. It's not even just negative runs. I feel like there's so many runs right now where Notre Dame gets 0 that it should have been at least 3, right? Like 2, 3.
Ryan, there was a run on Saturday. It was a cutback by Audric Esserman. Like, oh, that's a nice little 8-9 yard run. And then I looked at that, there was like 4 yards because he was making his cut so far behind the line of scrimmage, to your point.
Brian, there was one run. I don't think it was Estimate. It may have been maybe Chris Tyree. I forget who. It was definitely an outside oriented run though, so I can't remember exactly what play it was, but it was against Marshall, and it looked like a nice little burst and a nice run, and then it was 2nd and 5. I'm like, oh no, it's somewhat explosive play. Only was 5 yards. Like that's not great. I literally turned to my dad and I'm like, oh, it's tough sledding today, man. It is tough sledding running the football. If that's going to happen.
You and I have talked about for the Notre Dame defense. We talked about this going into the Ohio State game. Is you want to force those guys to make their cuts behind the line of scrimmage, because then you can rally to the football, and all of a sudden it looks like it's they're getting 4 yards past the line of scrimmage, but it's only like a 2-yard run. Line of scrimmage meaning where the line is, and that's what was happening here. That's what's happening to Notre Dame on offense with their run game
because
forcing to declare early.
100%. So the thing is that, a lot of players are taught to spill everything, right? Like they want them to spill to the outside. Why? Because you want a running back to run as far as he can for minimal yardage. Like you want that to happen, man. It's gap integrity. And also you're putting tread on the tires. If a running back ends up running 20 yards to the sideline to get 2, it's like, oh man, I just wasted a lot of effort to get 2 dang yards, right? Like those things. That matters. That matters so much. So yeah, that was my worry on Saturday though, Brian. I didn't even text you about it when it happened, but literally it was a 5-yard gain. And normally you're like, oh cool, 5 yards. Right. But like, I was like, oh man, that was way too difficult to get 5 yards. Like that was not an easy 5. Like that's a lot of effort to get 5 yards. Not great. Not great.
And it's got to get better because you do not have Tyler Buckner to bail you out with the pull stuff this week, like you've had in the past. A couple more things with run game. I think this is more of a attitude thing. They've got to play with more purpose in the run game, and that's twofold. Number one is just coming off with a little bit more P&V, man. You know what I mean? For the old school folks, a little P&V, and just coming off and just fighting and scrapping and clawing. That's obviously something that Coach Easton needs to get going. But I also feel like there's no rhyme and reason to the run game right now. It's like one play. They're just kind of line up and go double wing, and you kind of know what's coming. When the back is offset evenly, you kind of know what's coming. There's not a lot of purpose to what they're doing. The offensive line and I told this story when I was coaching one year, and it was one of the dumbest things I've ever seen a head coach do. Our head coach is also our offensive coordinator, and he would just kind of sit in his office all day and literally one time I walked in and he's like watching a sitcom in the middle of the day. He'd have me in my office working on the pass game. And he wanted the running back coach and the offensive line coach to work on the run game in their office. That's what he wanted. So I'm putting together a pass game, and I'm trying to get with the offensive line coach, who was the head coach's boy, hey man, what do you guys want to do this week formationally? And so he was like, oh, we'll figure it out. And he wouldn't tell me. So I'm like, okay, well, I figure out the pass game by myself. And so I'd come up with pass game stuff, and then we'd have run game stuff. But the run game stuff was being run out of certain personnel and formations. The pass game stuff was being run out of different personnel formations. And guess what? It didn't work because there was nothing to set up. You kind of could tell pretty early on, okay, here's pass and here's run. And that's what it looks like at Notre Dame right now. It's like their run game stuff is out of this stuff and their pass game stuff is out of this stuff. And they're not doing a whole lot out of each of those things that are opposite. And so that's what I mean also by purpose. So there's purpose in how you're going about your business. And then there's purpose in like, what are they trying to do here? Like everything in an offensive game plan should kind of work together and build together. Yeah, we're running this because we know we're going to set up some stuff over here, or we're running this because we know if they do this to overplay it, we've got this pass game stuff to go to hurt them, or if they overplay us this way, we've got some run game stuff to go to. There's just not a lot of that right now, Ryan. Like when they're in 12 and 13 personnel, pretty much know what's coming. When they're 11 personnel, pretty much know what's coming. And I think that's kind of really what I want to see more out of the run game, is just a sense of purpose. So mixing up your tempos, right, with how you get downhill. I think the personnel changes we've talked about. And the other thing too is part of that is, Ryan, they need to run the ball more out of their spread looks. Yes. They need to run the ball more out of 11 personnel, do more things to vacate the box, which means a lot more RPO. And this is kind of how we get into, especially now that Drew Pyne's the quarterback, you can't run as much read zone with Drew to scare defenses, but what you can do with Drew, who we think's a pretty decent decision maker from what he's shown in the past. He's got a very quick release, gets the ball out quickly. He's pretty accurate on underneath stuff, is mixing a lot more first and second down RPO stuff as part of it. So go 11 personnel, spread things out, because you're getting nothing out of your tight ends right now. Nothing. So spread out more, do more RPO stuff, within your run game. And I think that's going to be a big part of it as well.
Just emphasize, when you say nothing out of your tight ends, you mean in the run game. Just want to put that out there for people that may have misunderstood.
Right, correct.
Obviously, they're passing.
We're talking about the run game right now. You are correct.
Yep.
You are correct.
Just wanted to reiterate in case anybody misheard or just tuning in or whatever. But Brian, I think that the biggest frustration that I have is that the offensive line right now, I mean, I'll be very honest, right? Like, we're going to be honest about this. I don't trust every offensive lineman right now that has been playing a significant amount of time to block a player one-on-one right now. Like, it is bad, man. Like, there's a lot of spillage. There's a lot of penetration right now. So how can we make that better just off of a formation? If you spread it out, there's going to be less players in the box. It's basic, man. Like, it's not rocket science, guys. Like, at the end of the day, football is a numbers game. And you've heard me say that a million times at this point, right? If you're not blocking well up front, let's make it so that there's less people to block, right? Like, it's so basic, man. It's so basic, especially with, and we're going to talk about Drew Pyne more in depthly, but Drew Pyne is not the runner, obviously, that Tyler Buckner is. Tyler Buckner gives you a numbers advantage with the way that he can run the football. Drew Pyne does not do the same thing. So in order to make sure that the box is not super condensed, you have to win off of alignment. That is the point of it, right? So you're going to win the numbers game based upon alignment, and you're going to hope that your offensive line improves. Those two things will jumpstart your run game in theory. At the end of the day, Notre Dame needs to do it, but you're trying to make things easier for yourselves. And running against smaller boxes, less players, just basic stuff, right? If we want to block the least amount of people to have a successful play.
Right.
And that's what you can do from an alignment perspective.
It's about getting leverage, right? That's what teams are doing to Notre Dame's defense, right? And that's what Notre Dame's offense. And that's what I kind of get back to, is like, just the sense of purpose just doesn't seem to be quite there. And that's something that I want to see, obviously, more and more of from this group. So that's a focus. And then let's talk pass game, Ryan.
Yep.
Let's talk a little bit about Notre Dame pass game. Number one, they're going to have to – these first two kind of go hand in hand. Number one is they have severe protection issues right now. And I'm not even talking about just guys getting beat. That's part of it. That's bad enough. But what the teams have just kind of – they know how to get to Notre Dame. They know how to beat Notre Dame's protection scheme right now. They know – I mean, I've never seen a team have more corner fires against them over a year and a half span than what we've seen from Notre Dame. It was all year last year. We saw it last year, and they never picked it up. They're doing it again this year. Marshall did it multiple times. Notre Dame didn't do anything to stop it. nothing to stop it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's got to get fixed. Teams know that the teams are killing Notre Dame with inside fires, right? Just killing them with inside fires. And it's not even like super complex stuff, Ryan. It's like this should be figured out. So they've got to address that before they can fix none of the other stuff we're going to talk about matters if that's not getting fixed. Because here's what's happening to Notre Dame's pass game right now. And it's because of a couple different things. Number one is, like, one of the things we have on here is like they're running too many stop routes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the reason that's not as effective is because teams are just sitting at like 7 yards, 8 yards, and they're not going any further. And they're basically saying, you're not going to throw it deep. You're not going to have time to throw it deep. We're going to sit on all your quick stuff. And they're either taking it away by their pre-snap alignment or they're taking it away by their post-snap movement, Ryan. And that's why Notre Dame guys are just running into guys and they're not getting open. It's because of stuff like that. But that's because other teams know you can't protect to beat us down the field. That's one of the reasons they're doing that. And there's other reasons, but that's one of them. So if you don't fix your protection issues, like now, especially against Justin Wilcox and Peter Sermon, who are very good defensive minds for Cal, then you're going to have some problems. You're going to have some problems. And it's not as simple as just, the backs need to pass pro better. There's times that's true, but this is a scheme problem that needs to get fixed now.
It's the biggest problem I have with the game, Brian, and this is on both sides of the ball. I feel like there's no communication with this team. Like, communication struggles. And what is pass protection? Pass protection is communication, whether that is movement up front or you're sliding to a certain spot or you're big on big block, like whatever it is, man. At the end of the day, it's about communication up front. And I feel like there's a lack of communication right now. And I mean, point blank, period. The offense line needs to be better in one-on-one situations, pass blocking. Like they do. Like, you need to be able to block one guy and do a sound job and give him 4 seconds. Like, you have to do it. But I also think that there's a lack of communication. Like you talked about the fires, right? I mean, that play where we highlighted of Logan Diggs earlier, I think that was a double fire. Like, they made it look like it was going to be a crossfire, and then they just literally double A-gap blitz. And that's what it was, man. Like, it's nothing exotic.
That's a day one blitz install, Ryan.
Yep.
Day one blitz install.
That's like the first one.
Install pickup. Yes, it is.
Exactly. It's so frustrating, man. And you know it. And I mean, I just watched the Cal defense yesterday. They're going to do that same stuff because guess what, guys? Cal's linebackers are pretty decent football players. They're going to try to get them downhill too. And they're not. They have
good safeties as well.
They do have good safeties, and teams aren't dumb. You just mentioned that Wilcox and Sermon are both smart defensive minds, right? They're going to see what Notre Dame's been struggling with, and they're going to do the same exact thing. Yeah. It's not rocket science.
See it hasn't been fixed. They're going to go back to last year and like, press corners, kill this team. Well, let's do that until they make us not do it. Hey, you know what? Just sit on the short stuff and then take it away. Yeah, they have no answers then.
And they're going to see. They're going to see last week, Tyler Buckner threw 2 interceptions. It was on the same exact thing. It was a stick route, and the guy just was sitting on it, and it was just over from there, right? And that's what they're going to see, man. And they're just going to be like, I don't care about, even though you have shown the ability to get on top of guys and to get behind them, I'm not worried about you until you actually hit one, right? Like, I'm not worried about it until it actually happens. So, again, they're going to condense everything. That's not just condensing the box. That's condensing the alignment of the defensive backs. It's condensing as far as what their situation and their responsibilities are. Notre Dame is going to have to unloosen things, right? And for them to do that, they need to make some plays in space. They need to push the ball a little bit. They need to create some explosive plays. That is the only way that and it's not even a Cal specific thing. This is a specific thing in general. The only way to make guys respect you and to back off a little bit and not condense is to show that you can create an explosive play. Until you can, they're not going to respect it.
Right. I think along the pass game lines, Ryan, too, we talked about RPOs earlier. There needs to be a little bit more. I hate using, there's 2 words I hate using because I feel like they are just used all the time blatantly as like by people that don't really understand what that means. And that's simplify and creativity. But I don't know how else to do it. Maybe more versatility, diversity. I don't know what word to use, but they need to have more in their RPO package. right? Like, whereas right now
Diversity
it's
is a
like,
good word for it.
right,
Diverse,
it's like now
yeah.
screens and hitches and quick outs. Okay, those are fine, but teams are going to start taking those away, right?
Mhm.
You need to be willing to throw a field bomb. I'm sorry, as part of your RPO package. When you're on the left hash and you got one receiver outside and that only deep safety is right over the freaking ball, there's no other option against that press corner than to throw a deep ball outside. And if you don't have receivers that can win on there, then you need to find some that can.
And if Notre Dame
Right.
has done anything, Brian, they haven't hit a ton of those plays so far, but they've shown that they can win that way, right? Like they
The
can get on
receivers
top
are
of
winning
guys.
on those
Yeah.
routes. There's no
Yeah.
question. They
They
got to
are.
hit
They're
it.
getting open.
They got to
Yep.
hit it. And that's another one of these is the very next issue was deep ball success.
Mhm.
Like we showed this on Saturday. The play where if Tyler Buckner throws an accurate pass at the end of the second quarter, it's what was the score at the time? 9-7. It's 14-9 at halftime. It's 14-9. Notre Dame is up, I think it was 15-12.
Mhm.
It was the play right after the 3rd and 3 false start. They got to put the game away. So Jarrett Patterson makes his mistake, but then they come back the next play and they're basically running all verts. We explained this on Sunday, and the corner squats and Braden Lindsey does what he's supposed to do and runs by. And if the quarterback sees it and throws it deep, it's 22-12 Notre Dame, and we're having a completely different conversation right now. Well, this show might be not different because we'd still talk about some of the issues, but the Saturday and Sunday shows would have definitely been different. Right?
People wouldn't feel like they're going 0-12 anymore.
Correct. Because they'd be 1-1 and still ranked in the top 25, right?
Yes. And you can chalk it up to a bad week after playing Ohio State to the fourth quarter.
Right.
And yeah,
we would still be focused on some things that need to get fixed. But if you hit both of those throws, it's a blowout.
And it's 29 to whatever. Yeah, right.
And so that's the thing is we saw the same thing against Ohio State. Braden Lindsey got open by 3 or 4 yards. If it's a good pass, like put it like this, it's if CJ Stroud is throwing that pass and he gets time, it's a touchdown. The one to Lorenzo Styles and the one to Braden Lindsey. Right now, Tyler needs to play better. Now it's up to Drew. You got to hit those throws because it only takes a couple of those hits for teams to say, I can't do that anymore. Sorry. Right? Yeah. Like these, and that's the thing is right now, it's like, I don't care if the receivers are running by us because the quarterbacks can't hit them. Lorenzo Styles also got deep on a post route on Saturday, and the ball got thrown behind him. Now, I still think Lorenzo needs to make that play, but he shouldn't have to make that play. So it's on both of them. And that's another, maybe if you hit him truly over the top and in stride, he might outrun those guys. But I did think that one safety coming over the top might have had an angle to tackle him after about 40, 50-yard gain, I thought, maybe. But it's one of those things, Ryan, where if that guy undercuts that throw and he misses, it's a 70-yard touchdown. They've had so many opportunities for big plays where the receivers are getting open, which is why I'm confused by people saying, oh, they don't have speed. I'm like, are you watching the same thing I'm watching? Because I'm watching them run by Ohio. I mean, Matt Salerno ran by an Ohio State DB. And the reason it looked like a contested throw is because Tyler underthrew it and Salerno had to come back for the ball. But he beat the guy by a couple steps off the ball.
Yep.
Right? And so guys are getting open on the vertical stuff. Now, where they suck at getting open is on the intermediate and short stuff. That's where they have sucked getting open. But they've gotten open on a lot of deep balls. Now, they can do better. The press releases need to get better, like we talked about. Push guys outside, slip inside if they're going to try to take your outside leverage away, things like that. But the fact is, there have been enough, like, I'm not talking like open by a step. I'm talking about like wide open because they smoked the dude opportunities in the first 2 games to be 2-0 and we're having a different conversation. Quarterback play's got to get better, and it's up to Tommy Rees, and the line's got to get better because on a couple of those hits, quarterback was getting hit in the face or getting sacked before he could throw the ball or when he was throwing the ball. And it's asking a lot of a sophomore quarterback making his first and second start to complete a 45-yard pass as he's getting smacked right in the face. That's asking a lot. I'm sorry. So protection's got to get better, but this isn't a scheme thing, Ryan. You're designing stuff to get guys open.
All right.
Freaking hit it, right? That's the one thing that I can point to and say that's a player problem. You can't blame that on the coaches other than you say, okay, well, you didn't coach the guy up well enough to complete a deep ball. But I'm sorry. I'm blaming Tom Rees for several things. A quarterback not hitting a wide open post route at the end of the half when he knows that's what's going to the ball.
It's not a Tommy Rees thing. Yeah. Brian, that is what has been frustrating though for everyone, right? It's the fact that Well, it's been frustrating for me, I should rephrase, right? Because everybody wants to just throw the coaches under the bus. And, like, I
Sure.
get it, man.
Yeah,
Because,
and
like,
they deserve
again,
plenty of blame.
I've
Yeah.
been so critical of Tommy Rees for the last 2 weeks. Like, I have. Like, he needs to be better. Like, there's no doubt about it. But the point blank to it is that coaches aren't helping players, and players are also not helping coaches. When the coaches are putting them in position, they're also not making plays. Like, at the end of the day, both sides are not holding up their end of the bargain. That's the point blank to it, right? And it needs to be better. It has to, because I also am getting tired of the speed thing, right? I mean, you have legitimately in your starting lineup as running back and receivers, you have a 4-3 guy, you have a 4-4 flat guy, and you have a 4-4 something guy at wide receiver. So please stop with the speed stuff, man. Please stop with it. It doesn't. It's dumb. It's dumb. It is actually dumb, because you can turn on that Marshall film again.
And we've seen those guys do that in the past, Ryan.
Yeah.
So did Braden Lindsey? This is the one I wrote in the article the other day.
Braden Lindsey got slow, apparently.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Did Lorenzo Styles go from smoking a guy that started at Ohio State last week in a bowl game against the pass defense and ranked top 10 nationally in the Big 12?
Yeah.
Did he all of a sudden get slow after having 100 yards and 8 catches against Oklahoma State, and just smoked the guy on a post route for a touchdown? Right? Did Braden Lindsey all of a sudden get slow? No. Now, are they looking slow at other times? Yes. And that's the next point of talk about, is that the route running has to have more purpose and urgency. We've talked about that already. We talked about that in the post-game show on Sunday night, or not the post-game show, but the upon further review on Sunday night. You can tell the difference on what's coming by the release of the receiver. That's not a good thing. And this is why I said in the show on Sunday, everything needs to look like a go route, because one of the biggest mistakes that receivers make is, now there are times when you are purposely coming off slow because you're trying to juke them and say, hey, I'm coming off. You don't know where I'm going. Bam, I'm breaking out on a quick 5-yard outcut. That's a different deal. But unless you're doing something like that, your release off of 4 or 5 step release on anything being run past 7 yards needs to look like you're running a go route. And it is so obvious with the Notre Dame receivers, outside and inside, when they're running something that's going to require a cut or a stop within 10 to 12 yards. It is so obvious. And when I mean cut, I'm not talking like a post cut. I'm talking like an out cut, an option, an in, something like that. It is so easy to diagnose that. And that's what DBs are taught to do.
Yes.
And that's one of the things I learned early on as a receivers coach while talking with other DB coaches, because that's who I spent time with, was talking to DB coaches, not receiver coaches. What are the things you look for? And one of the first things I look for is, I'm looking for your release. And so there's a couple things you look for. Number one, are you coming off the line with your feet choppy? Because most DBs don't look at a guy's eyes. They're looking at his hips and his feet. That's what you're looking at, right? Because you can't go somewhere unless your hips and feet take you there. My eyes can look in all types of different directions, but my feet can only go in one direction. That's it. My hips can only go in one direction. My eyes can go all types of places. You're reading the hips and the feet. Yep. And so if I see you get tall and I see your feet get choppy, or one of those two things, I know you're trying to set me up for some kind of stop or some kind of cut, right? But if you come off with a forward lean and you are coming with then I think, okay, this guy's threatening me. He wants to run by me. And so what I always taught was, that needs to be your language on a hitch route and a go route, because I want to get that DB sinking. So I don't want to catch a hitch and then the guy is, tackling me to 6-yard gain. I want that guy to flip his hips. I make my cut at 6 to 7, and I'm right there, and that guy's still running. You see that happen at Bama all the time.
Yep.
You used to see that happen at Clemson all the time, because those guys will come off of purpose and then, bam, quickly hitch up, sink their hips. Bam, I'm catching the ball right now because that guy's still running by him. Like, there is not, because you can tell if they're running a short route, a stop route, or a deep route just by their release. That stuff has to get fixed right now. Right now. He doesn't teach that, Ryan. It's one of those things where he's still trying to deprogram from the past, but it's his job to deprogram. You can blame Dell for putting him in the situation, but you're now going into game 3. It's time to start seeing those things be different. So there needs to be a greater sense of urgency off the ball on every single route, unless it is a designed, because like sometimes you'll run a cross route, Ryan, which we need to see more of there too. Like we've talked about, more mesh, more high lows. I want to see more high lows. Some of those under routes are going to be slower developing because you want to let guys clear out and things like that. And then you kind of come and then you go. That's different. But if you're running any kind of vertical release, I don't care if you're stopping at 5 yards or you're running a go route, it needs to look the same until you're ready to stop. Because as soon as you come up, whether it's off the ball or at the top end, that DB knows he's stopping, right? And the only time you should come up is if I'm running a double move. And by the way, for the love of God, can we please get a double move?
I haven't seen one.
Although you could call it,
seen one?
but here's the thing. You could call it, but you can't protect it right now.
Sure.
Which goes back to point numero uno.
Well, and this is a position where you can have an advantage, I think, down the stretch, Brian. Like the next 10 games, is there a great corner left on the sheet? I mean,
well, Garrett Williams is a good player.
Garrett Williams is a good football player, sure, but like
Tony
outside
Grimes,
of that,
but I mean that defense is terrible.
It's not great.
I mean,
it's not great right
the
now.
kid from Stanford,
It's not great.
The kid from Stanford's pretty good.
Caillou Blue Kelly's
but none of those guys
player,
are elite. None of those guys are, like Derek Stingley Jr. when he's healthy. None of those guys are, elite players. They're good players, but they're not guys that could. But they've got one.
Yeah.
One. Notre Dame's should have multiple receivers.
Yeah. And I saw someone in the chat, I forget who said it, Brian, but like I agree with him completely. It's not the narrative is that Notre Dame lacks speed at receiver, but the real actuality is that they lack skill at receiver right now because they're not. It's not being developed properly, right? Correct. And I'm not blaming Chancey Stuckey on that because again, to your point, these guys have been taught a lot of bad habits, right? So I'm not blaming them after 2 games. Well, if it's something where it like starts to
if we're more and more, like
it doesn't fix,
and we're still having the same problems, then yes, it now becomes like I kind of look at it like this. I give you 3 games to get that stuff where I should start seeing progress.
Improvement.
And that's my issue with the O-line and the receiving core. It's not that I know that Chancey teaches something different, but it's not coming out on Saturdays. And at the end of the day, guys, it doesn't matter if you look great in practice. It matters that you play that way on Saturday. So yes, I am not coming down on Chancey Stuckey yet.
Exactly.
I am not coming out on Harry Heastand yet, but we're getting into that territory where if we don't start seeing some improvement, then I am coming down on you. There's no doubt because you're making guys with speed look slower on certain stuff, and that's it's not okay. It's not okay.
Agree. Need to see progress at the end of the day. It's something where when you're a new coach, again, there's going to be a little bit of a grace period because you have to reteach a lot of stuff or deprogram and start from the bottom up. But I think that was the difficult part of this past game was that you didn't see progress really, right? Like it seemed like the same, worse in certain instances. So it's got to get better.
So for me, Ryan, I need to see more high-low stuff is conceptually things I want to see. I want to see more things where you're forcing them to chase across. I want to see more vertical stretch stuff. That is what a high-low essentially is. It's a vertical stretch. You're stretching a team vertically mixed in with the horizontal stuff that they're running. The horizontal stuff they're running is fine. It's just needs to be mixed in with other things. They need to start pushing the depths of the horizontal routes deeper. They're stopping. Like what they're doing now is if a guy's standing there at 9 yards, they just collide into him and try to outposition him like it's basketball. No, run through his outside shoulder. Get him to flip his hips, then break back, and then get open. Those are technical things that need to get fixed. But then also you need more creativity, more diversity in the RPO game, and then enhance the screen game. The perimeter screen game, enhance the perimeter screen game, enhance the running back screen game. It all needs to get better and used more effectively. And I think that'll set up. And then also off of that, let me get in a little pump, throw downfield off of that a little bit as well. So that's where you can use Michael Mayer as a decoy. I'm running a little now screen look to him because they're going to play that aggressively. I'm going to maybe run it early and throw it to him. Next time I come back, pump, and then throw it down the field. Those are the things that I want to see schematically.
Because I felt like last game, Brian, we saw a couple just like bubble screens pretty early on in that game off RPO action. And then again, like I just felt like they went away from it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it works.
It's like once they got off the script, it's like, okay, we're not running RPOs anymore.
Because I think Lorenzo had a decent little gain off of it, and then he actually might have had 2 different decent gains out of it. But there was he definitely had like 1 for 8, 1 for like 12-ish, something like that in that ballpark, and then it just went away. And I was happy in that first drive, man. I was like, even though they stalled and they didn't score, I was like, oh, but at least we saw some stuff that we wanted to see, right? And then it just kind of went away during the rest of the game.
Yep. Last thing, Ryan. What the offense needs to look like. What are changes that need to happen right now that Drew Pyne is a quarterback? This is the final piece, and we'll get to a little bit of a mailbag here for a little bit once we wrap this up. But let's talk about what the offense needs to look like structurally now that Drew Pyne is a quarterback. Number one,
sure,
push the tempo more. as I asked Coach Freeman about this yesterday, and I really liked his answer because he said what I would do. I am not going to all of a sudden become 2010 Oregon. I'm not. That's not what I'm talking about. But I do think, especially early, that they do need to push the tempo. I have no problem with the check with me stuff. Every spread tempo team has that as part of what they do, including Chip Kelly when he was at Oregon back in the day. They would line up real fast, get it, fake a snap, and then check. Now, they were never going to snap the ball in that particular instance. But then you look at the sideline, you get a check with me. They're doing that way too much at Notre Dame. There needs to be times where if they came out in a series and just went fast, the other team wouldn't know what hit them because teams know they have all day to kind of get lined up against Notre Dame. And you're doing that, but then you're not doing the multiplicity within that you need to do in order to be effective snapping the ball late. Right. And so that's what we're saying is like when you give a team, down to the 5-second mark to get lined up and you kind of get a read on what they're doing, it makes it a lot easier to defend.
I think this past game, Brian, didn't Marshall have like two different penalties where they had too many men on the field? And I was just like, Notre Dame's not even running with incredible pace. That only proves. I know, it was so weird, man.
It made so weird sense to me. So when you look at that, it's coming out with a little bit more purpose, a little bit more. Because see, sometimes here's the thing. Sometimes in order to get your players playing with more urgency, you have to force it on them.
Sure.
The way you force it, because what do we keep talking? There's no urgency. There's no urgency getting lined up. There's no urgency coming off the ball. There's no urgency. So what do you do to do that? You speed up their mind, right? You speed up their minds, which then speeds up their bodies. And what I mean by that is get lined up. Let's go, 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 go. Have you ever been at a practice of a team that runs tempo?
Oh,
it is intense.
Sure is.
I mean, it is an intense, high-stress type of situation.
It's a workout, too. It's a workout, man.
And so, again, I'm not saying do that all the time. I'm not a tempo guy, but we advocated for this early last year as well. Because here's the deal. If Notre Dame would have played Ohio State and Marshall in the first two games last year, they probably start last year 0-2 for many of the same reasons, right? Especially offensive line-wise. And what did we advocate at the time? You got to come out and you've got to go with more tempo. You've got to run RPOs. You've got to go with more tempo. You've got to pick up the pace. And when they finally did that, Ryan, the offense took off. And it wasn't just taking off because they played bad teams, because they played Toledo. Toledo was a mediocre MAC team. That's it. And they looked like garbage. They offensively did not look good against a Purdue team that honestly didn't have a great defense last year, as they showed against like Ohio State and other teams. Like they had a couple good players and they tried hard and coached well and all that, but they weren't super talented.
Right.
They should have held Notre Dame to 27 points. They had to push the tempo a little bit. They need to do something that sparks this unit. And I think just pushing the tempo early and just getting Drew into a rhythm is super important against Cal. And it's something that needs to be a part of their arsenal week after week. And then you can do some of the other things, Ryan, like more movement. Now, this is going to seem contradictory, and it somewhat is, but it's not. Because, again, I'm not talking about being 2010 Oregon. That's not what we're talking about. Get lined up. Get your call in. Get lined up. Honestly, if I was Tommy Rees, I would start scripting every series. I would for now, because you got to come out with at least 3 plays that we're running on the first 3 plays of this series every time and just get it called. Here's what we're doing. Get it called. Doesn't matter what happens on first down. If it's 2nd and 12, then the next call, what the next call is going to be, and you go. You get lined up and you run it. And so those are things that I need to see from them this week, where it's more movement. What I mean by that is, they'll just kind of line up and stack. They'll come out in one play and be a normal trips formation or a normal, deuce personnel with 2 receivers here, then a wing tight end and a guy in the boundary, and just normal 2x2, and then they'll run their stuff out of it. They'll do like simple motions across the tight end, a little boom by the running. That's not what I'm talking about. And then jet. What I'm talking about is like start in a base alignment and then flip and shift real quick, or motion Braden Lindsey down to get him off the press. Motion Lorenzo Styles across. Line up in a deuce formation where you've got the tight end attached the boundary. You got your W off the line. You got your Z and your X, and then motion your W across to gain leverage. Right? Mm-hmm. And then do a quick rollout and get a leverage play that way, or do a bubble screen that way, or do something that way. There needs to be more of that as well. And it needs to be called. Get lined up and call it. Run it and motion and call it. That's tempo, but it's not, again, we're not talking about 2010 Oregon tempo. but it's
Right.
it's playing with a sense of purpose. I think those are things that are going to allow Drew Pyne to get into a really early rhythm, and it's important for him to do that, and it's important for the offense to do that because they need confidence. Ryan, we said it last week. This is an offense that needs confidence.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't get it.
Yeah.
And then the last two things for me is less scheme, more personnel and formational diversity. Right now, they've done a decent amount of formational diversity. They've done 21 personnel, 11 personnel, 12 personnel, 13 personnel. But everything is kind of, what they're running out of 21, what they're running out of 12, what they're running out of 11. What I'm saying is less scheme and then doing it out of all of that stuff. Figure out a way, because this is what good teams do. What do we want to run this week? We want to run an inside zone, we're on a duo, we're on a counter, we're on an outside zone, and then this other, a buck sweep. Okay. Okay. Figure out a way to run it out of everything that we do. How are we going to run out of 11 this week? How are we going to run it out of 12 this week? How are we going to run it out of 21 this week? And then how are we going to run it out of 10 or whatever else that you're going to do? Right. Which I don't know if I'd ever do 10 personnel right now with Notre Dame, but just in theory. Right. And then say, okay, now let's fit. Okay. Here's the concepts we want to do off of that pass game wise to where now everything just kind of goes together more, Ryan. And it's not as easy to get a tell on what they're doing. That's another thing I want to see. And finally, the last thing for me, Ryan, is 12 personnel needs to become a much less important part of this situation because you used to run in the past because you could get something out of it run game wise. George Takis brought value as a blocker last year. Tommy Tremble, my frustration was he didn't get used enough in the pass game, but he brought a lot of value as a blocker. Brock Wright brought a lot of value as a blocker. I'm seeing no value right now with Kevin Bauman as a blocker. None. And I said this to you before the show. I think you could make a case that the guy that gave the best effort and had the best execution in the run game at tight end on Saturday was Eli Raridan. And that's a problem.
Who's viewed as an undersized tight end that, well, not undersized as in length, but undersized as in weight and had to put weight on, right? And coming off of an offseason injury. It's troubling, man. I think that the biggest thing for me, Brian, that you echoed a couple times, and I want to reiterate it again because it's so important for a couple different reasons, is to get Drew Pyne in rhythm. Why is it important? You mentioned confidence, but even more than that, Brian, like his style of quarterback is a player that needs to be in rhythm. If he's a guy that gets pushed too much out of structure too often, he's going to make some bad decisions. Like it's just going to happen. It's not his game, man. He is the modern spread quarterback where he wants to get the ball out of his hands quick and make accurate decisions. That's what he wants to do. And that is so important for the timing. It's so important for being in a good, positive rhythm all the time. Right. So that for me is like, I would not even be opposed to them throwing the ball a little bit early in the game just to get him in somewhat of a rhythm, right? Because I just think that you need to show that there's a threat to throw the football and get the numbers in your favor. Like that stuff needs to happen. So getting him in rhythm is paramount in this football game. It needs to happen because it's how he wins. He is not the type of player where, I go through 1, 2, 3. It's okay. I'm going to break the pocket and I'm going to make something happen. Like that's not Drew Pyne. It's not.
Right.
He can do a little stuff out of structure, but you don't want that to be you don't want it to be a large portion of his game.
It needs to complement all the other things that he's doing.
Yes.
100%. Correct. And that's going to be the key. And then that stuff will then set up the opportunities to take shots down because Drew Pyne is not a drop back launch at 60-yard kind of guy. He's not. He can throw it deep enough to where you can hurt teams with the stuff we've seen, the one-on-one goes, the one-on-one posts. He can hit those, right? And I would run some of those. I would design a shot early and say, hey, we got to get something going, man. Like if you get if you get it the first, this is what I'd say if I'm Tommy Rees. The first time we get into a 2nd and 2 or a 2nd and 1 or even a 2nd and 3 in this game, I am going deep. Right. And I'm probably doing it out of 12 personnel. I'm going to purposely line up in 12 personnel and do that stupid double wing thing that they're doing and then just say, Drew, we know what we're going to get. They're going to bring that safety down. They're going to be in a cover 1. They're going to leave the field outside guy lined up. You are catching it. You're catching, drop and rock and throw it. That's it. Right. And let her go. And then say, hey, it's up to you to go win. Hey, Lorenzo, go win. Braden, go win. Right, Drew? Flip and get it out there. or I mean, if you want to design a post route or something else, but you get the point that I'm making. It doesn't have to be that particular play, but do something where I'm taking a design shot. Because if you start hitting one or two of those, then the next couple teams are like, okay, because here's the thing. Other teams know that Notre Dame's getting guys open deep. They just don't think they can protect it or hit it.
Right.
And as soon as you do, though, especially against a defense like Cal, who is going to be one of the 4 or 5 best defenses they're going to face all year. That's my concern about this game. This is going to be one of the 4 or 5 best. It's one of the 2 or 3 best coached defenses they're going to play all year, right? Their talent is getting better. They actually have some pretty deep. They have a kid that rotates in on the D line that got offered by Notre Dame, Xavier Carlton, who's a physical freak.
44 went to Utah.
He's a physical freak, but he's kind of a raw football player.
Yeah,
but he's a physical freak. I had Daniel Scott and Jackson Sermon on my all opponent first team going into the year.
Number 10 at linebacker's not a bad little football player either.
Right. So, their 2 edge players are decent players. So this is a team with decent talent on defense, really good coaching on defense, pretty decent depth on defense as well, Ryan. And like I said, very well coached and tough. This is going to be a great test because if Notre Dame's offense breaks out this week, and I'm not saying it's going to, I'm not predicting that, but if it does, that's a great sign because this is a much better defense than what you faced last week. And we both thought a lot of Marshall's defense for that level.
Sure did.
But Notre Dame, Marshall didn't stop Notre Dame as much as Notre Dame stopped Notre Dame because the things Marshall was doing to stop the run game were leaving them exposed to big plays down the field. Notre Dame just didn't hit them. I mean, there should have been 3 60-yard touchdowns on Saturday. I mean, I'm not talking about like, oh, you should just dudes open for those type of plays.
Not like a 50-50 ball type of thing.
No, we're talking dude is open by 3 or 4 steps, right? And you just got to hit him. And so that was the frustrating thing for me. So 12 personnel is really not bringing you value right now. So unless you're going to make the move and put Eli Raridan, I was told that Kane Barong has finally been cleared. I'd give him a shot because I think he's a pretty good blocker. I don't know where he is at with like his strength and his knee and all that, but I'd give those guys a shot because Kevin Bauman may be a great kid, but this is not what was the big concern we had about him in the offseason. He wasn't a very good blocker last year. Now, he was hurt and he had all those other things people say, well, is he hurt still? Because he's not blocking very well now. And I told you and Sean, so I raised a little bit of a stink with some folks about the grades for Notre Dame on PFF last week. And so I was told that somebody different, and I know who supposedly did the grades for Notre Dame this past week, and it's someone whose football mind I respect, right? And Ryan, I told you it was, and they had Eli Raridan as their second best run blocker on Saturday.
Wow.
And on the whole team behind only Joe Alt. Now, again, 3 plays, but he looked good on those 3 plays. And the guy that was at the bottom of that list was Kevin Bauman. And that's when it was like, okay, that's kind of what I saw too. And so I don't know if that's going to continue moving forward for PFF, but for this game, I felt like, okay. And then the grades matched. I mean, they graded them out higher again than they did against Ohio State, even though they didn't play as well because they were more realistic of what they should have been. Right. So that's another personnel change that I would strongly consider making is that. And I would play Raridan, Barong, and Holden Stace more as that number 2 tight end. But 12 personnel, unless you're willing to make a change, needs to be de-emphasized, in my opinion. It does.
I really want to start seeing Raridan and Holden Stace play, Brian. I do. Because, again, I don't want Kevin Bauman to just be off.
You could put all your freshmen in the first 2 games, and guess what your record would be? Same as it is now.
100%.
You could have started an all-freshman offensive team on the first 2 weeks, and now it wouldn't have been as competitive, but your record would be the same. So what have you – I mean, seriously, you don't have anything to lose. You're 0-2. You just lost at home to Marshall, right? There is no, well, we're just going to keep doing what we're doing. No. To a degree, that's true. But in a lot of other areas, it's like, you know what? We gave you a chance, and we're going to go with the more talented kid. Because the problem is you're playing – it'd be one thing if you were making mistakes with the more talented player. Say, look, he'll get it right. But you're making mistakes with guys that aren't as talented. And that's where I can't accept that. I can't accept that. So put the talented kids out there, give them confidence, let them play, do things to get Drew Pyne rolling, or he needs early success. I'll say this. If Drew Pyne starts 8 of 8 against Cal, the way that Tyler did against Ohio State, this is going to be a very fun game to watch.
Yes.
Unless it's like a bunch of garbage, because like it was 8 of 8, but 128 yards. I mean, if he hit an RPO, went for it's like that level of success, then this is going to be a fun game because I do think of what it'll signify, and it'll get Drew comfortable and confident because Drew Pyne is in desperate need of an infusion of confidence. The way that he's played in the spring, the way that he played against Marshall, the things that we saw at some of the practices. This is a kid who's regressed as a player. Now my hope is that he gets back to being the Drew Pyne that's doing the Conor McGregor strut after throwing a touchdown pass last year. A kid who thinks he's better than he is. I actually want that kid back. And if he can do that and they can scheme some things to help him out, Ryan, then I think this team's got a chance to get this thing rolling again. I do. There's too much talent for it not to happen.
I need to see good football, Brian. Need to see it, man.
I get it.
It's got to happen sometime. I'm desperate for some good football right now because the Rams lost last week too, man.
Oh,
so
yeah.
now I'm 0-3 right now, buddy.
At least you lost to the Bills. Did you watch the Bronco game last night?
I watched some of it before I went to bed. Yeah.
Same old.
At least Jerry Jeudy had a nice touchdown catch during the game.
Yeah,
that was nice to see.
He did. Yeah, and it just goes to show that sometimes just throw it up. Give your guys a chance. Yeah, because that was not exactly a good ball from Russell Wilson.
No, it wasn't. And Jerry Judy's not really known as a 50-50 guy, but he made a nice play on that one. So
he did. He really did. All right, we are going to get to some super chats here in a minute, but we wanted to wrap up this portion of the show. Obviously, Ryan, this is a team. This is stuff that can be fixed. The question is, will they make the moves to fix it? It begins with accountability at the top as the head coach. He's then got to let the coaches know this isn't good enough. All options on the table. And if he needs to, he needs to step in and say, see that number 15 right there? That's the most talented kid you have at that position. If you can't figure out a way to get him going, then I'm going to find someone who can. Right? Now, I don't know if Marcus Freeman's got the personality. He's not an a-hole like I am to say it like that. But that needs to be the message. Figure it out. See that kid number 9? It's got the fastest 10-yard split time in the history of tight ends in the world. Sorry, I had to. Needed to laugh. Then what are we doing here? You know what I mean? Like what are we doing here? If you can't get that kid on the field, then what are we doing here? And so that's where it needs to be. And if they can make those changes, then I do think they can get this thing rolling. Now, are they going to throw 50 on the board on Saturday against Cal? I don't see that unless they get like it's like a Wisconsin type of game where you get a couple pick sixes and a kick return. I don't see that. But I think they can at least get some momentum going where they can put some points on the board and get this thing rolling to where then you go play a bad defense like North Carolina. You're going to go into that bye week with some momentum. That's the key. Do what you got to do to get the win. Do what you got to do to kind of start getting some rhythm, build some confidence, because then you can start rolling. Because you're going to need this offense to win. You're not going to beat BYU 13-10. You're not going to beat North Carolina 20-17. I don't think. Nope. Of course, but I also would have said there's no way Alabama and Texas is going to be 2019. So who freaking knows in this crazy college football season? But it's probably not going to be the case. If you can get through these next couple games and get into the bye week with some momentum, then I think this team gets rolling. If not, then it's going to be ugly because it doesn't get easier from here. It doesn't. No. Not for the offense. We're talking about the offense. Now, for the team, I mean, you've already played the best team you're going to play all year. We're talking about specifically for the offense. You have not played the best teams you're going to play yet defensively. And one of the better defenses they're going to play this year is the one they're going to face on Saturday. So if they look good Saturday, that's a great sign. Yep. A great sign. Okay. So, Ryan, that is going to be it. Before we go to the mailbag, please hit that like button, everybody. Hit that subscribe button. Hit the notification bell. Share this podcast. If you're listening via podcast platform, please give us a 5-star review. We would greatly, greatly appreciate it. And, of course, sign up for the message board at boars@irishbreakdown.com. So, Ryan, it is mailbag time, and we've got a lot of good super chats today and a lot of good questions that I want to get to today. I want to roll through the super chats first. If you have questions you want us to ask, please throw them in. If you asked a question earlier in the show that wasn't a super chat, odds are we didn't see it. So go ahead and throw it in there now, and we'll get to these things. We got about 30 minutes, so we're going to really rock through some of these questions that we had. Alan Watson has a couple super chats at the beginning. Thank you very, very much, Alan. He says, I had a team like this when I was a kid, pre-dinosaur time, and we simplified the entire playbook to see what we did well and then build from there. Would you consider this approach, or is it too simple of an approach? So Alan asked this question before we even started the show, Ryan. He asked it at 1:55, so 5 minutes before we started the show. So, Alan, I love where your head's at. I think we've already answered the question. I do think you need to do that. Now, you can oversimplify.
Mhm.
And simplification doesn't mean you run 3 plays out of 4 formations. That's not simplification. They're going to kill you because they're going to know exactly what you're doing and you're going to be in trouble. But less scheme, more looks is when I say simplification, that's what I'm talking about. Less scheme, more looks. Less scheme, more tempo. Those are the things to do. So and then also part of that too, and this is especially true of the defense, have Maris Lofau play one position. Have JD
Yeah.
Bertrand play one position. And then once they master that, then move them. And to a degree, that's true at offense. I think Braden Lindsey's shown he can make some plays out of different positions. I would move him around a little bit. He's played W, X, and Z this year. I'd do more of that. I think Lorenzo can do a little bit more of that. I would have him strictly be X and Z. I'm not really ready to put Lorenzo in the boundary yet. I don't think he's ready for that yet. That's why you play Tobias there, right? Play Michael Mayer there. But those two, but other than that, like let these kids master something first, then build out on from it. So that's also part of simplification is only asking kids to learn one thing. And even if you don't change the scope of what you're doing, then kids can learn that one thing as opposed to learning all that out of 2 positions. I think those are very, very important parts of this, Ryan.
Mm-hmm.
Next, great comeback.
Well, I agree with what you said. Ryan, you are a genius. You are a genius, sir.
Stop it. Alan Watson with a super chat. The one thing that I have hated the first 2 weeks is the rush to the line, but then we stop and adjust. Once in a while, need to actually hurry and snap the ball to make it effective. This came pretty early in the show too. Didn't come before, but yes. Yeah. It's Alan's. I think he nailed both of his super chats, Ryan. I think he's spot on both of them.
Yeah, and I think that there's time where, check with me's are fine to the sideline, right? Like you just want to, in crucial situations, especially like, oh, you sure we want to run this play? Like we're good. We won't change, all that good stuff. But I agree. Like that was one thing that me and Brian adamantly agreed upon is that the pace needs to pick up a little bit, right? And if you're checking at every single play, then you're hurting your pace. You're hurting that structure, right? So yeah, I agree with you. I think that it needs to be less check with me's, except in the most crucial situations. Like, when it's money time, I still think that it's okay to have like those check with me opportunities. But I agree for the most part, you need to cut down on the just look to the sideline and you need to go, man. I think that's Brian. You said it right early on in the show that Tommy Rees needs to have answers scripted out beforehand, right? Like he needs to have stuff ready to go so that you don't have to have the check with me's as readily available.
Yep. Next super chat from David Knight. Thank you, David, very, very much. Brian and Ryan, knowing the O-line is experiencing the difficulties the O-line is experiencing, are plays available to offset this? Also, is that an OC issue because he is trying to figure it out? I don't know if there's things that you can go to make a struggling offensive line better. The struggling offensive line is going to be a struggling offensive line no matter what you call it, if they're struggling because they're just not getting the job done or playing with good fundamentals.
Right.
I think there's some things that they do well, some things they don't do well. And I think right now they need to figure out what they do well and focus on that. And then find the errors and the other things. Like you can't just say, well, we do inside zone really well. Okay, we're just going to run inside zone every play this week. That's not what we're talking about. No. But build off of that, right? And maybe emphasize that more and then de-emphasize maybe a couple of the other inside looks. Maybe make that your primary inside run and you complement it with formational stuff, leverage stuff, RPO stuff. And you complement it with your counters and your outside zones and some different things to do off of that, right? Those are things that I would consider doing. Maybe you boot off of it a little bit. So inside zones are bread and butter run play. And we don't have a quarterback that can pull and run it. But you know what you do? You have a quarterback that can pull it and get outside and bootleg off of it to keep the backside honest. Yes. So again, that's an old school way of attacking a backside, an aggressive backside player on the zone that can be part of the read. That's and it's kind of an RPO, right? I mean, that's you can call it pure bootleg, but I think there's also merit to just doing it off of an RPO, right? And it's a naked, because that's what a naked bootleg is. A naked bootleg it's not even a naked bootleg, it's just a naked, right? There's a bootleg, which usually means you have a puller, somebody to protect you. You're blocking for the quarterback movement. And then there's a naked, which is you're just blocking the run look, and the quarterback's got to get out there and he's by himself. He's naked, he's all alone, right? That's what that means. And so I think you can do those things off of the inside zone action as well. So there's things you can do off of it as opposed to running 4 different inside run looks. You got one that you're really good at, run it a lot.
I think the worst thing that you can do when your offensive line is playing well is to be a predictable football team. And I think that's what the worst part about it right now. I think that's why, I mean, Brian, you made the point that more looks in less formations, right? Like more options. If you give your team options, then at least, even if your offensive line's struggling, at least the defense has to play a guessing game a little bit, right? Like they don't know what's coming at them. They have to be more reactionary than proactive, right? So I think that that's the biggest thing, is that you can't make it easy for a defense when you're also not playing well. Make it difficult for them. Yep. Right now, things are way too easy for defenses playing against Notre Dame. Make it difficult for them.
Yep, absolutely. Super chat here from Patrick Tolan. Thank you. How much longer till we see Billy Schrauth? I don't know. I mean, Billy Schrauth is a true freshman, missed the entire spring. Yep. So I don't know if he's the answer today. But if he is, great. If he's not, I mean, there's plenty of options. There's plenty of guys that you can turn to. But my number one priority is getting the guys at the offensive line that they have out there coached up.
Yes.
Now, and if that doesn't change, then you have to make the change. So there's no doubt.
We had a question yesterday, Brian, where someone asked, what would be your starting five for the offensive line? Like, and someone basically was asking, would you keep Patterson at guard? Would you keep him at center? And my response is pretty similar to my thought process here. I honestly do not care who the five starting are. I care that this is an evaluation opportunity for the coaching staff, and they put who they conceive to be the best five on the field. That's all I care about right now, man. That's all I care about.
Yeah, I don't care if it's Josh Lugg or somebody else. I don't care if it's Jarrett Patterson or somebody else, or Zeke Crow or somebody else, or Blake Fit. Don't care.
I could care less if Jarrett Patterson's at center or at guard. Could care less.
Move the tight end for all I care, as long as it works.
Right. Exactly. Like, I could care less. People kept talking about, hey, maybe Blake Fisher to guard is a good idea. And I'm like, if Blake Fisher ends up at guard, I don't care as long as he's playing good football. I don't care if Tosh Baker's playing well or whoever, Caleb Johnson or Michael Carmody. Like, I don't care who the five is. All I know is that it's not good right now and it needs to be better. And right now it's not. And it's evaluation opportunity. So we'll see. And if the coaching staff is as good as I think they can be, right, they're going to take this opportunity and they're going to nail it. Right. And we'll see. We'll see how it ends up. But I think we should give them a little bit of time, right? And I think that this is a big opportunity for this coaching staff to show that they know what they're doing. Like I think there is opportunity through adversity right now that they can take advantage of.
Agree. Christopher Morgan with Super Chat. Thank you, Christopher. Now that Tyler Buckner's out for the season, this is actually more of a comment, and I'm on board with it. Now that Tyler Buckner's out for the season, we need to stop the bleeding and get a win versus Cal and then go from there. Now it's about heart, will, pride for the team. You're true to a point, but you don't win just on heart, will, and pride. Right. You win because you play with heart, will, and pride, and you execute and play sound fundamental football. Right? And you have talent. I think they have talent. They need to show that they can do all the other things. Can they play with heart? Can they play with will? Can they play with some pride? We're not really seeing a lot of that. It's not that they're playing soft. They're not. They're just not playing with a lot of fire. And offensively, that was also true against Ohio State. They didn't play soft. They competed against Ohio State. They didn't play with a lot of urgency and a lot of fire, even in that game. No. And it got worse against Marshall, to be honest with you.
But what I agree with completely is you need to win against Cal. Like, that's just point blank, period.
I don't care if it's 9-6. This may be a game you can win 13-10. You know what I mean? Like, this and Navy might be the two games you can win 13-10. But, you know.
At the end of the day, I said this yesterday on the show, I wouldn't be like happy with, let me rephrase this. I wouldn't be like ecstatic with a 13-10 win over Cal, right? Like, I expect them to win this football game. But that being said, Brian, like, they need to taste victory. Like, it needs to happen, man. Like, they need to win this football game. They have to stop the bleeding. I agree completely with how Christopher kind of said that. I mean, I even coined that during a football game, you know, like when there's a big third down where you're kind of struggling a little bit, get the first down and breathe, man. Like, this is a breathing opportunity, right? Like, I know they said stop the bleeding. I think it's an opportunity to breathe too. Win this football game, and the staff and the players, they can breathe a little bit. Like, they can take, you step back, and now you can exhale a little bit. And now let's get the next breath for the next game. So an opportunity to breathe is what I'm looking for this game.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Let's go to the next super chat we got from Jim D. Mateus. Jim, thank you very, very much for the super sticker. We appreciate that. Actually, and he did have a question here. He said, I want to thank you and your staff for its knowledge and insight. You're welcome. in your opinion, the changes that you and Ryan suggest, how long would it take for these players to fully implement these changes? I mean, you should start to see it. Like everything we talked about, Ryan, for the most part, you could see immediate changes Saturday. It won't look like all of a sudden they look like 2019 LSU. It's not going to be that. Not against Cal. But you should start to see those changes right away and see them be successful. Hit a couple deep shots, push the tempo a little bit more. The run game gets going because you make those changes, especially the personnel stuff. Personnel, tempo, and some of the schematic adjustments, Ryan, you should be able to get fixed now. The protection issues are not going to completely go away, but you can make them better now. So, like, most of the stuff we've implemented, Ryan, you tell me if you agree with this or not. They are one-game things that you can implement and start to see success. They are not 100%. Do this and in 5 weeks you're better. You'll be better than you are now, but they will be better than what you've been, in my opinion.
Sure.
In like
you can see instant
you made the changes.
Yeah. 100. I mean, it's good. It's just going to look different, right? Even if it doesn't 100% work, it's still going to look different, right? I mean, so you'll see the dividends early on. It's because we're talking more about. I mean, we've spent a lot of time in the show, Brian, talking about just schematic stuff that needs to change, right? Like that's what we kind of spent a lot of time in this show about. Is a player magically going to go from a bad player to a really good player in a week? Probably not. But at the end of the day, we're talking about things that we think can maximize players to get them going in the right direction. So this is a week of progress. That's what I need to see. Again, we need to breathe. We need to progress. We need to start showing growth. That is the biggest thing for this game against Cal.
There are some people that really need some perspective. This is one. Ian Johnson. Are we Iowa but slightly better? Notre Dame has more than doubled up Iowa like this last week. I mean,
Iowa
is 7. Iowa's offense, Ryan, their offense is averaging 5 points a game.
It's painful to watch. Guys, if you think that Notre Dame's offense is tough to watch, please go watch Iowa. It is awful. Like they're because at least a couple players on Notre Dame's offense where you can say like, okay, he's still playing pretty well. He's a good player. Iowa is not blocking well. They're not throwing well. They're not running well. They're not catching well. Like they're literally not doing anything well.
Anything well.
Right. I saw they had somebody, and again, it's PFF grades, so like, okay, whatever. Someone sent me, they did not have a single player over a 65 grade on their offensive side of the football. Not a single one. Spencer Petras is like a 38 rating through 2 games.
So bad. So bad. All right, let's get to some more here. And thanks. Great one so far. Christopher Morgan with a couple super chats. We need all IB staff to be coaches at Notre Dame, and LLP Malik come play quarterback to save the season. Let's go Irish. I kind of laughing. I still see us 9-3 this year. I hope you're right, Christopher. And then we had another thing down here. Well. Nick Lane said, Brian, would you be OC if Notre Dame offered it to you? No, I would not. Because again, it's one thing to sit back and say this is what needs to be done, point to those things. It's another thing to go out there and implement the specifics of what need to be done. That's what Tommy Rees and Harry Heastand and Chancey Stuckey and Deal McCullough and Jared Parker need to do, is implement those things. What we're looking at it from is a big picture thing. Also, it's kind of like the other thing I was asked. It would be incredibly arrogant for me to say I could step in and be the offensive coordinator at Notre Dame today. Being critical of things and is not me saying I could do a better job. Now, if I was still in coaching, do I think I could be there? Well, yeah, of course I think I could be at a place like that. But I haven't coached in like a decade, right? But what I can do is point to things and say, these are the things that need to be done, sort of big picture. Now, how do you schedule your practices around it? How do you implement it from a teaching standpoint, an install standpoint, a repetition standpoint? All of those things need to be figured out by the people that are in those jobs. And so I think I can offer advice. I've had coaches in the past have asked me for their advice, and I'm going to offer my advice. But that's a whole different thing than saying I'm going to walk into South Bend today and pick up the game plan and teach it and go out and beat Cal this weekend. That'd be such a slap in the face to Justin Wilcox and Peter Sermon that it's not even funny, right?
Yep.
It's up to the guys that are being paid that money to figure it out. What we're offering is things as outside observers that know the game, things that we know work, things that we think fit this personnel. We're offering, because a lot of things we've talked about are even the things that are sound specific to you all are broad, talking about the high-low concepts. I didn't draw up specific high lows because those are going to vary from week to week based on the coverages and the type of structure that you're going to face defensively. There's so much more to it specifically to design those calls, to design those schemes, when to call them, how to call them, out of what structures and those type of things that goes into it, that I would find that to be an incredibly disrespectful thing for me to say. I think that Tommy Rees in the past has had moments where he has looked really, really good as a play caller. Right now, he's not. He's got to figure out what's going on. The head coach has to figure out, is it something that I'm doing? And if it is, then you do what you need to do to fix it. The OC needs to look at and say, is it something I'm doing? And then fix it. And then he needs to then make sure his assistant coaches are doing what they need to do. So the staff is there. They're the ones that will fix this or not. Mm-hmm. We are offering our opinion to you all. We're not doing this for Tommy Rees and Marcus Freeman. I'm not going to lie. I hope that they would listen. I don't think that they are, but I also don't think it's assumed that they would need me to tell them this. I would hope that they know this, that they're smart enough to know this. And like last year when they made the changes that we'd been saying all year to make, they didn't do it because somebody sent Tommy Rees a bunch of my shows. And he's like, oh, this Driscoll guy knows what he's talking about. He did it because he knew that's what they needed to do, and they finally figured out a way to get it done. Right? And that's where they need to be.
Plus, you're a great analyst and publisher. You don't need to be a coach.
Yeah, I kind of like my job. Although that's one of the few jobs that I would say would be actually be a pay raise. So make pretty good money. So Christopher Morgan with another super chat. At this point, now being ranked 40th after week 2, now with a backup quarterback, I say play everybody, develop the young players. No position is safe. Need leadership now more than ever. Open it up, Tommy. I will say this. Go ahead, Ryan. You have something to say.
I was just going to say I understand where the thought process is coming, and I agree with it to a certain extent. But my openness, Christopher, personally, is every position now is an evaluation for me, right? Because you're 0-2, you have to be better. So there's going to be certain spots where it's like, if that guy's not playing well, why would I not play a younger kid that can give me a similar type of impact or maybe more? Like, let's see. So everything would be an opportunity more than maybe it would be in the past, Brian, right? Because like there's going to be some times where like you're just not going to play a freshman in a certain spot because it's a tough position for a freshman to handle for one, and it's a paramount position for success. But I would be very open to Christopher's question right here as far as my willingness to play a younger player. And I would be much more open to the competition level getting boosted up apart. Like I wouldn't every week, my starting 5 offensive linemen would be under evaluation. Every week, my starting defensive line would be under evaluation. Wide receivers under evaluation. I would give everyone an opportunity to play 100%. I would give them the opportunity to play if they earn it.
You still have to win. And the things that we're talking about playing Tobias, it's not to build for the future. Talking about Xavier Watts, it's not to build for the future. It's about these are things we think they need to do. Chris Tyree being the focal point. It's not about building for the future. It's about these are things that we think they need to do to beat Cal and then go beat North Carolina and then go beat BYU, because there's nothing more important right now for Notre Dame than that. You can't go 4-8 or 6-6 and say we're building for the future, because you won't recruit well if that's the case. And now you're starting from scratch, and you shouldn't be in start from scratch mode. Culturally, to a degree, sure. But winning football games, you can't do it. You got to figure out ways to win right now. The reason we think certain young guys should play, and Ryan, I think you agree with this, is because we think they give them the better chance to win now. I think they need to play Eli Rarid and Holden Stace, not because I'm ready to build for the future. That's a byproduct of why. I think they give you the best chance to win now based on what we saw the first 2 games, right? And that's the difference. That's the difference, in my opinion.
I agree completely.
I did want to say this, Ryan. Ed asks, but could you do a better job at Iowa? I'm sorry. This is going to sound super arrogant, but I do think I could get more than 7 points a game in the first 2 games against South Dakota State and Iowa State. South Dakota State's a really good FCS program. They should not hold you to 3 points on offense. Iowa State's defense, I mean, dude, you scored fewer points against them than Southeast Missouri State did the week before.
Ooh.
Like that's
bad when you.
That's real
bad,
bad.
Especially
they had, and Southeast Missouri State doubled up Iowa in yards.
Oh my god,
doubled them up, 320 to 150.
That is crazy to think about.
Yeah, that's freaking horrible. And there's actually people in the media that have pushed for Brian Ferentz to be, not Notre Dame media, national media, that pushed for Brian Ferentz to be a guy that Notre Dame should have looked at as their offensive coordinator. That's why I don't take people seriously. Like, yeah, I'll tell you who afterwards.
I'll go. I would be open to Phil Parker, I guess, but Brian Ferentz, no thanks.
Yeah, exactly.
No thanks.
Exactly. Christopher Morgan with the last super chat for him. If you guys were a head coach at Notre Dame, would you start to draw the line after 2 losses? Not talking about firing anybody, but just saying, look, these needs to change. We're Notre Dame, not buddy anymore. I don't think it's ever should have ever been buddy, but yes, I mean, when you lose to Marshall, there's nobody. Like I said, there's one coach that I would look. Well, probably 2, but really only 1 after last week. Even though I think Mike Mickens' corners have probably been one of the best position groups they've had. There were still mistakes that they made on Saturday.
Sure.
But there's only one coach that after Saturday is not getting his butt ripped by me. Not butt ripped, because, I mean, these are grown men, but like not getting like a stern talking to, like, no, this isn't good enough. This needs to be better. That's Brian Mason. That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. And that includes Marcus Freeman going home and like looking at a big mirror and then fussing himself out too. I mean, everybody here has got to do that, and that's what good coaches
self-evaluation
should do. Yeah, like, there was a coach at Notre Dame that couple coaches at Notre Dame that I was pretty close with over the years, maybe about 4 of them, that just off the top of my head, that I could never criticize them more harsher than they criticize themselves. Like, the reason they were cool with me is because I never said anything publicly that they thought was like unfair. They like no like, oh, not only that, but like sometimes they're like, dude, you weren't hard enough on what we like, because not that that's just kind of how they were. Like it was never good enough. Like, you know, if I'm upset with this, again, I think I try to be fair about this kind of stuff, but it was just kind of like, I should never be more upset about this than you, because your job is actually on the line here. Notre Dame goes 3-9 this year. Guess what, Ryan? I'm still running Irish Breakdown. It's my site. I'm not going anywhere. The coaches might, right? So their jobs are even more on the line than mine is. So I would hope that they care more about this than I do. And so to me, I shouldn't have to necessarily, as the head coach, be on you about this. If you are not more pissed at yourself than I am pissed at you, then we got an even bigger problem than being 0-2. And that's when you say, okay, changes need to be made, right? There's 2 reasons to fire a coach who's underperforming. 1, he doesn't think he's underperforming. Del Alexander literally did not think he was the problem. And I know this for a 1,000% fact. He thought the players were the problem. Like, I got no use for you at this point in time. I want guys to look at it and say, yeah, the players need to play better, but this is on me. I need to do a better job. I didn't get them ready to play. I didn't do this. I didn't do that. That's what I want.
Self-accountability.
Yes. And if you're not that kind of guy, then that doesn't mean you don't say, hey, look, we got to recruit better players. That's always a part of it. But it also be like, but I didn't do a good enough. Look, it's one thing to say you don't have good enough players to beat Ohio State. If any coach looks in the mirror and says, our dudes were not good enough to beat Marshall, he no longer deserves to be at Notre Dame. I'm sorry. Because you are now projecting your miscues onto your players. Well, they are the ones that do this. It's your job to get them ready to play. 1,000% your job to get them ready to play. I hate coaches. I remember one time I was on a coaching staff and we were having a very disappointing season. We were a national playoff team the year before. And I remember our offensive line coach sat there and this, we almost got into a fist fight for this. He looks around and he goes, guys, at the end of the day, we're doing what we need to do. They're not making plays. I went freaking off. Like, we're like nose to nose in the office. I was pissed. I was like, no, I know what you're doing in the offensive line. I know this isn't a player problem. This isn't us. And if we're not willing to look in the mirror, then we're going to keep losing, because we're the ones getting paid to win football games, not them. Yeah. You know, and so if you have guys like that, then Ryan, you got a much bigger problem than whatever technique they're teaching on Tuesday. And I don't think, from what I know of the coaches in Notre Dame, I'd be shocked if there's any of them that are looking in the mirror on Saturday night saying, you know what? It's the players. I did what I needed to do. I'd be shocked if that was true. I don't think that's what's happening at Notre Dame. I don't think that's Tommy Rees. I don't think that's Chris O'Leary and Al Washington and Harry Heastan. I'd be shocked if that's what their mentality was.
That would be very disappointing if that was the fact.
Yeah. I mean, there's nothing about any of their histories that would tell us they're that kind of guy.
Right.
The only one you could even say that about is Chancey Stuckey, because he's an unknown.
Right.
But I don't think he's that way either. Players are usually more competitive than that, right?
Yes.
So I would be shocked then, but just the history of what we know of all these coaches, I just don't think that there's anything there that would tell us that.
I agree. Yeah.
I love this from TJ Fallon. His TJ has the first game prediction of the week and a super chat: Notre Dame 5, Cal 3. Book it. That's my prediction. So I sure hope that's not the case. Casa Hodge with a super chat. Thank you, Casa. We're all really hoping Pyne plays well, but due to Pyne struggling in the blue gold game and previous game, how long of a leash do you two think he should have? I don't even want to. I'm right now, Casa. I'm focused on the Cal game, right?
Yeah.
I'm focused on the Cal game because you bench Pyne and you risk losing him. And now it's what you got: Steve Angeli and Ron Powell III. Can we just I'm not worried about leashes right now. I'm worried about getting Drew Pyne to be able to play to the way that I know Drew Pyne is capable of.
Yeah. We spent this whole podcast basically talking about how the offense can maximize itself the best with Drew Pyne in mind, right? Like it wasn't even a part of our conclusion. I think the thing too, Brian, is that yes, I understand that the recent work from Drew Pyne has not been great, but there has been some good moments of Drew Pyne. If you're looking at last season, you just have to hope that there's an inflection of confidence in him and he gets back to what he was looking like, man, because I think he can win some football games for you if he's back to the 2021 version of Drew Pyne. But I don't have a leash on him either right now, Cass. If this turns into a season where it's just like dreadful every single week, then we can talk at that point. But they're 0-2 right now, and there's still hope, right? There's still hope for me. So
no doubt. And we have a couple more super chats here. Wade Garrett says, "Hey guys, how was our offensive line the first season Heastan coached us in 2012 or whatever that was? Just curious if we expected too much of a turnaround." No, look, we talked about this in the offseason, Wade, that we don't know how quickly it can get going. We said, we hope it's the opener. And you thought they'd, how long will they till they look to their full peak? It would take some time. But I'm sorry, what we've seen the first 2 weeks is not acceptable. You can't blame Jeff Quinn for that. I know that there, to a degree, Jeff Quinn holds some responsibility because Harry's still breaking the bad habits that they made. But to me, this is a Tommy Rees and a Harry Heastan problem because I think because they are asking too much of them too early. I think that's part of it as well. But they need to do a better job. They should be better. If Harry Heastan is still the guy that we think he is, they should have been better the first two games, Ryan. I'm sorry. It's Marshall. You know what I mean? Like you can say, okay, maybe Ohio State's a little better on defense this year than we thought. Okay, fine. I'll chalk that up. But Marshall's a defense that you and I both think highly of for that level. We 100%. Should not have seen what we saw on Saturday. Not because it wasn't, oh, wow, that guy's a really good player. It was like, why is no one blocking that guy?
Right.
How do you guys not know the basics of inside zone right now? Your tackle has a guy inside leverage on him. You should be thinking about helping him. Like, why is that not even a thought for your 60-year offensive, 60-year player at right guard, right? Those are things that got to get fixed. And I'm not blaming Jeff Quinn for that in week 2. Yeah. I'm just not, and I'll blame Jeff Quinn for getting it to the point where Harry's got to fix all those things. But, Coach Heastan's been here for 9 months now. He's got to figure it out, right? And so I want to see them start to improve quickly. I'm not saying they're going to look like the Joe Moore Award winners on Saturday, but they need to look better. You need to look better.
It's because that there's so much talent, right, Brian? That's why we're frustrated with the wide receiver group. That's why we're frustrated with, multiple spots on this team is because there's talent. Right. There is. We've spent all offseason talking about how Joe Alt and Blake Fisher might be first-round picks eventually, right? Like they're so talented, man.
Because of what we've seen them do.
Yes, 100%. Like it's not just a pure projection. Like we've literally have seen Blake Fisher and Joe Alt play really good football. We've seen Jared Patterson play really good football. You have seen Josh Lugg play good football in spurts, and Zeke Correll too. Like you've seen them all play good football at points in their career. For whatever reason, it's not meshing right now, and it's not good right now. And Wade, it's unacceptable. Like Brian said, like it's the offensive line is way too talented to be as bad as they are right now. Right. That's the point blank period to it.
Right. Because we'd said, well, I don't know how long they're going to look like the group they're capable of, but it never in my mind did I think that it would look like it's looked the first 2 weeks. Right. And maybe that's on us, but I don't think so. I really don't. And as far as to the specifics of his question, the offensive line in Harry's first game in 2012, they actually had a really big game against a Navy team that, in Ireland that wasn't – they weren't really good that year, if we're going to be honest. That Navy team gave up 193 rushing yards per game that year. and they gave up over 300 yards. Like Notre Dame rushed for 293 in the opener. That got topped 3 times that year.
That's
Army
crazy.
did it, Air Force did it, and Arizona State did it that year. So they were not a very good rushing team. But if you look at Notre Dame after that, they struggled for the next 3 weeks running the football. They did. And the next week they went for 52 yards on 36 carries against Purdue, 1.4 yards per carry. The next week against Michigan State, 122 yards, 3.6 a carry against Michigan State. The next week against Michigan, they were 3.0 yards per carry, 94 yards on 31 carries. And then it wasn't until game 5 that they had a breakout against Miami. And then starting with Miami, they went for at least 200 yards in, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 out of the next 8 games. And one of those was 184 yards against Boston College. So they went from bad to pretty good over time. But again, we're talking about Marshall, though, right? Like they didn't play Purdue and Michigan State and Michigan. They played Marshall. And it's just not acceptable. But it can get better, and I expect it to get better. And it needs to get better.
Has to get better. Yep, has to.
Yep. So super chat from Alan Watson. Thank you, Alan. Just a reminder that these are still kids. Sure, they are not men. They are men, but young men. The hatred and meanness towards Tyler Buckner when he got hurt was disgusting. We are better than this. Thank you, IB, for keeping those idiots off the site. Was there people like that were doing that? Look, if it's on Twitter, Twitter sucks. Okay. Twitter sucks. And people on Twitter are just that do things like that, just suck at life, to be honest with you.
Well, Brian, I mean, I was in the stands and I did overhear someone when Tyler Buckner got knocked out of the game. Someone was like, "Oh, good, finally." And I was just like, "Seriously, buddy? Like you just got hurt." Like
people like that suck. Like we banned a guy from the website that said before that, I hope somebody from Marshall hurts him, knocks him out of the game. So you're not posting here anymore. You're not gonna have room for that. That's just
it's awful.
Yeah, and I don't care if you said that about a professional guy making $10 million a year. Like, that's just wrong. That says more about you. That says more about you than it does about the kids that are playing football.
Oh, 100%.
Sean Michael with a super chat. Brian and Ryan, thanks as always. How much of a leash do you think the staff will give Pyne before going to Angeli? They need Drew Pyne to think he's got an incredibly long leash. The last thing you want to have Drew Pyne thinking about right now is looking over his shoulder that, oh, gee, I got to go make every single throw or I'm going to get benched. Drew, you're the guy.
Drew can't try to be perfect. He can't try to be perfect.
And then if Drew proves not to be the guy, then you can figure something out then. But Drew is your starting quarterback right now. You need to have faith in him, confidence in him, and coach him in a way. Now, you may think in your head, I'm not going to give him a very long leash. But he can't think that.
Yeah.
And you can't be in a situation where he struggles and in the first quarter you yank him and put Steve Angeli because then you have nowhere else to turn. You have nowhere else to go. I wouldn't do that. I mean, just let the kid go out there and play. Let him develop. And understand, too, Notre Dame fans, they're playing – and we've said this since the summer. We said this in the summer. Cal is going to be one of the better defenses that Notre Dame is going to face. Their offense sucks, although they have some talented young players. J. Michael Sturdivant's a good football player. And that freshman running back, Jade Knott, that kid can play.
He can go, man. He's
a true freshman. Now, their line stinks and their quarterback stinks. But they got some athletes at Cal, but they're not good on offense. They just scored 20 points on UNLV. Okay. Yep. But their defense has some pros on it. It does. This is good defense.
Yep.
And you want to see them getting going. If Notre Dame's offense was looking good right now, I'd still be saying the same things I'm saying about Cal. Like, this is good defense. They're going to give you some problems. You better bring your A game today because this team can do some good things there. So I'd give him a longer leash. James Mertz, Brian, if Pyne does happen to struggle, do you think Angeli comes in or do we give Pyne a couple of games? So we get a lot of this, right? A lot of these kind of questions. And I just want to point out that can't be your thought process if you're Notre Dame. It can't be, okay, this is what we're doing, but if he sucks, we're going to bet. You have to be worried about getting him ready to play his game and not looking over your shoulder. But this is what we said at the beginning. Now that Pyne's the starter, now let's look to the next guy. Because that's just kind of how it goes. With
so weird, man. So
now, if he
weird.
comes out there and throws 3 picks in the first half, sure. Okay, fine. I get that. I'm not saying that Drew Pyne can do nothing that's going to get him benched. That just can't be your thought process. And it's not my thought process right now. My thought process is what do we got to do to get Drew Pyne going and to get this offense going? And if he can't do it, then you figure something out. But right now, that's not where I'm at. It's not where I'm at. Beefeater, a.k.a. Toe Jam. Brian, what are the odds you put on the offense turning it around this week? Honestly, man, Ryan, I don't know what your answer is. I don't have a clue.
I don't have
a clue.
any. Toe Jam, this is like one of those situations where I don't want to put any input into this because I don't know what to expect. If I'm being completely honest, like I don't know. Like it could be one of those situations where Notre Dame looks a ton better, Brian, and they win 33-14 or something, right? Or it could just be
or 27-10.
Sure.
Right? I mean, again, this is good defense.
Or it could be a massive struggle. Like, I have no idea.
I could see them going out there and scoring 40 on Cal. And the reason why is because they could force a bunch of turnovers to give them short fields, and the offense is playing well. I have no clue. They just scored 15 points on Marshall. I don't have a clue what they're going to do this weekend. I wish I did, but I don't. I really don't. I'm glad I'm not making predictions today because I have no clue. The mood that I'm in today after watching the offense again last night, it probably wouldn't be good.
Yeah,
to be honest with you.
Ask us on Friday when we have our predictions.
It probably wouldn't be good. It really wouldn't be good. Got another one here from Robert Bishop. Can anyone tell me what's up with Pyne and that mouthpiece? Does he do that intentionally? I think it's just force of habit. But yeah, it's kind of annoying. He never puts it in his mouth. He always has it like sticking out. Drives me a little nuts.
That's like every corner ever because corners like to talk trash, so they never put their mouthpiece in.
Yep. We have a super chat from Sean Michael. Brian, B. Ryan, thoughts on snap counts for Burnham and Ford. Collie, hope to see you and Vince Saturday. So we'll address the defense a little bit more tomorrow, but I mean, I'm not against playing anyone that's talented. I'm not. But again, defense hasn't necessarily been the problem. I think the first thing to fix at linebacker is not switching players out. It's letting guys zero in on, and we'll talk more about this tomorrow. Let these guys zero in on one position. Let's let Maris play will and will only for a while and see how he does and simplify things a little bit because he's running around confused. And that's been an issue that we've had for him in the past. You need to let that kid play fast and have this is what you're doing and not trying to cross train all those guys. I want to see that first. Then we can talk about personnel next because, again, that side of the ball has been pretty good for more than it's been not been good in the first two games.
And I don't think, because Burnham and Ford are both really talented players. So is Kali Brian, right? But I don't think there's a lack of talent on defense at those spots. Like the defensive line has a lot of talent. The linebackers have talent. It's not like you're sacrificing talent just for efficiency, and efficiency isn't playing well, right? Like there's still talent there. So I agree completely.
Now I would consider playing those guys if they're healthy in certain roles, certainly. Sure. Especially if guys aren't. Look, if the guys you're playing now aren't getting after the quarterback, then why not give Josh Burnham a shot, right? Can't be worse than what you've seen on third down. Tyson Ford, if he's practicing better and playing better, I'd give him a shot. But but again, I don't think necessarily personnel. Like when we talk about the defense tomorrow, Ryan, we're not going to be talking about a lot of switch this dude out for that dude. It's clean this up. It's clean that up. Because if you're going to take guys off the field based on their performance so far, we're talking about Isaiah Foskey, Jason Adamiola, Cam Hart. You're not taking those guys off the field. If you do, you're a bad coach. It's what is going on that's making those guys not play to their potential and then figure it out. And if their attitudes are bad or they're not working hard, that's a different conversation. But I don't think that's ever an issue with those guys. It's, hey, how do we get our dudes to start playing like dudes again? That's got to be – and is it them? Is it us? Are we not putting them in the positions where their skill is better suited? That's the question you got to ask yourself. I'm not saying that's the issue, but that's what the coaches need to be asking themselves. Not, hey, let's bench this guy or let's bench that guy. It's different on offense because on offense, you're not playing your most talented player. There is no more will linebacker on the roster more talented than Maris Liufau. There isn't one. He is the Tobias Merriweather of that position. Same thing with Isaiah Foskey. Same thing with Riley Mills at big end. It's about getting those guys to play to their potential. Same thing with Cam Hart at corner. It's different than receiver and running back where we don't think they're playing the best guys. Tight end. This is where the best guys are out there. You got to get them to play better. And what is your role in that? And then what is their role in that? Because there does come a point in time where the players got to step up and say, you know what? I'm not pointing the finger anymore. Except this way, right here. I'm pointing the finger at me right now. And you hope that they have that. You hope that they have that mentality, Ryan. But the coaches have the mentality of what do I need to do better to unleash that guy? They both need to be looking in the mirror. And if the Notre Dame coaches and the Notre Dame players are both looking in the mirror, then this thing's going to get fixed and get fixed quickly. If you start saying, well, this guy screwed up or that guy screwed up or whatever else, that's when you start having problems, Ryan. that's when you lose your football team. Get these last couple questions here. Brian, if you have to go, I understand you've got to go, but we'll finish up here pretty soon.
Gotcha.
But when you got to go pick her up, you can just take off. Irish Chi-Towns or Beefeater also asks, Brian, is the center like the QB of the offensive line? Is John Kristoffer right? And Jarrett Patterson should be moved back to center. I think John's motive for that is he thinks he needs to move back to center because he wants Andrew to play left guard. And honestly, at this point in time, I mean, that's got to be an option on the table, right? I mean, look, there's no options on the table right now, guys. And am I going to have a conversation this week with my staff if I'm Tommy Rees and Marcus Freeman? Am I going to have a conversation with my staff this week about possibly moving him to center? Yeah, it has to at least be addressed. I'd rather not, but it has to at least be addressed. And I think that just ignoring it would be a mistake, in my opinion. I do. Let's see here. Irish Chi-Town says, Brian, why aren't great practices translating to game day? I couldn't answer that. I'd have to be there. Honestly, I'd have to be there to know the answer to that. And I'm not, and I haven't heard it from anything about why that is. I don't. All right. We just have some more people that we can block here. Irish Blooded, why do you think who do you think gets worse TV ratings this week? Oklahoma versus Nebraska, post Frost, or Texas A&M versus Miami post loss to App State? I would imagine Miami fans are going to be pretty fired up about this. So I think they're going to be a little bit more fired up than maybe Oklahoma fans are about playing Nebraska. And it's a big game for Miami. Like, they're going to College Station with a chance to beat a preseason top 10 team, a team that's still ranked in the top 25. That's a big, big game for Mario Cristobal. You start off 3-0 and you go on the road and beat Texas A&M. That's a great way to build around your offense, or build around your program, I should say, and really get your program rolling. John Lacey with a question. John says, it was great. By the way, John, it was great meeting you and your family on Saturday. I really appreciate the help you guys gave us getting set up. Really, really meant a lot. He said, would a West Coast style offense suit Pyne, or does that not make much sense from a shotgun, thinking of Alex style minus the running ability? So, John, the stuff that I like that Notre Dame does sort of out of their pro style spread has a lot of West Coast influences. So am I getting out my old Lavelle Edwards playbook and running that? No. But there's a lot of the principles that have kind of from that offense that have bled into other systems. I mean, even some of the air raid has some of those principles. Get the ball out quickly, be accurate. It's about timing. And so there are some principles to that I think fit what Drew Pyne can do. Quick game, timing, accuracy, getting the ball out quickly. But it's not so much a full West Coast, like dive into the West Coast full go. It's more of just there's principles that already exist in your offense that need to be emphasized a little bit more that I think would work for Drew Pyne. So it's a very good question. Very, very good question. So, everybody, that is going to do it for today's show. Appreciate everybody for being with us. We are going to have a little bit of an interesting show tonight. We are going to have Sean and Vince have already recorded their show for today. They're going to talk about, Coach Freeman and some different things like that in the show tonight. So it'll be interesting. Their show is recorded. I've not listened to it yet. I will actually be hosting tonight's show. We're going to play that show live at 6:00 for IP Nation Sports Talk. So they won't be live, but I'll be there. So I'll play the show and then I'll answer, if there's any super chats or questions during the show, I'll answer them afterwards. And so, because Sean, normally I don't have Sean go to the Tuesday night player press conferences, but Al Golden and Tommy Rees are both going to be there tonight. And I thought it was kind of important to have the beat writer there for that. So Sean's going to be at the press conference tonight at 6:30. So we needed to record the show, the IB Nation Sports Talk show early. So I will play it live at 6. We'll have it live at 6. I'll be there to kind of set it all up. But that's what we're going to do today with the 6:00 show. And of course, Ryan and I will be back tomorrow. We're going to talk about the Notre Dame defense, some things that Notre Dame defense needs to do to get fixed. And then Thursday, we're going to kind of have a overall Cal breakdown. So we'll talk about Cal, introduce Cal. I don't think a lot of people were necessarily too thrilled about 3 straight shows of Cal. We'll talk about Cal on Thursday. And then when we do our game prediction show on Friday, we'll do some of the breakdown stuff that we kind of do earlier in the week. And so that's what we'll do. And so we're going to focus a little bit on Notre Dame today, these next couple days, and then get to some Cal stuff on Thursday and Friday. And then next week, hopefully we'll be on a more normal routine with what our shows will be. So anyway, that's going to do it for today. As always, everybody hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, sign up for the message board. If you're listening via podcast, give us a 5-star review, share this podcast, both by telling people about it and then also hitting that share button down there as well. And there is a new cool feature here that if you're not able to give a super chat, there's now a thanks tab where you can actually hit the thanks thing and kind of donate to the channel. But of course, the best way to always donate to the channel is to join the message board. And you can always join via one of our booster clubs, either gold, shamrock, blue, or gold. So you can give that way as well if you want to support the channel. But of course, we also, more than anything else, appreciate you donating your time to us and being a part of this wonderful IB Nation community. So have a great rest of your day, everybody. We'll see you hopefully in about an hour and 36 minutes. And then, of course, we'll see you again tomorrow on the Irish Breakdown podcast.